Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, once again to the Yorkshire Gamers, a Reet Big War Games podcast. And we've stumbled forward towards episode number 40. And this one has been released a couple of weeks after the previous one. And today, my guest is Steve Shann. And Steve is an author and also a painter. And we'll chat with him very shortly about both those things in some detail. Before we do so, a little bit of housekeeping, as I always like to do, and I just want to have a little bit of a mention, really, about the reception to the last episode, the one I did with Martin Kelly from the US about big gaming in America, and I'd had a break of 6 weeks beforehand, so I wasn't quite sure whether everyone would forgotten what Yorkshire Gamer was, etc. But the reception is absolutely amazing, and would you believe it? There was more downloads in the first week of that particular podcast than I normally get in a entire month. So thank you very much for that. I hope you've come back for another episode. If you're a new listener, lovely to have you on board. I was a little bit concerned with having big gaming in the USA that it'd be like Russian bots and that sort of thing. But the statistics that I get is for full downloads, and it also gives you country of origin. And there aren't many Russian ones or countries of unknown origin, which are always a little bit suspicious. So, welcome on board, everyone. It's lovely to have you with Yorkshire Gamer Podcast, and for you regular listeners, you know what's coming up anyway. So it's going to be a long interview, very similar to the one I did with Martin Kelly, which was about 2 hours and 40. This is slightly longer, and when I started these podcasts, I was very conscious of trying to get around 2 hours as a maximum. But as time's gone by, the feedback I've had from you people out there who listen to this is you don't really mind a long episode. I put breaks in it so you can stop if you want to. And I've also had people say it's fine, it's on in the background. I'm painting. I paint along to the conversation, and if it's on for 3 hours, I paint for 3 hours. Simple as that. So this episode is again, as I said, 3 hours maybe. I've not put it together yet, so I don't know the exact length. But that's the reason. This isn't a short format thing. I'm not doing a 10-minute interview with somebody who's trying to sell you something. I am doing an interview with somebody from the hobby, and we might talk about books or something that they sell, but I deep dive into people's hobbies. We do the quiz, etc. I don't want it to be a sales pitch. I want it to be an in-depth interview. And if you come back and listen to it in 3 or 4 chunks, great. You know what you're getting. You know what you're getting out there, don't you? Before we start, I'm going to do a quick shout out for a new wargaming podcast, historical wargaming podcast, and that's called On Patrol. And it's a couple of Americans. Called Fighting Kentuckian and Windhurst Productions, and those guys have got together and they've done a single episode so far. Very good. Listened to it whilst walking the dog yesterday, and interested to see where they take it. It's not, as with any new podcast, it's not really developed its taste or style as yet, and I'll be interested to see where the guys take it. But what I did like about it is they were positive about stuff. It wasn't a monathon, and they were reasonably okay about big games, but we'll put them right, won't we? So, if you enjoy your podcasts, and I know a lot of you out there do, and I'm always searching for new wargaming content that has a positive slant to it, then give On Patrol a go. Just one episode so far, but hopefully the guys will do some more, and we'll see it develop over the coming months. So it's about time we got down to the interview, and just so you're aware, this interview was recorded face to face in my Wargames room, and using the mobile recording equipment that I have, which is not the same as the stuff that I use over the internet. The microphones aren't quite as good, and with anything done face to face with a little lavalier lapel mic, levels can go up and down as people faces move forwards and away from the mic. So I've done quite a lot of work trying to get the levels similar all the way through, but it's not perfect by any means. But I'm a wargamer, not a sound engineer at the end of the day. So sit back, get yourself a cup of tea, and you might need a loo break in the middle of this one, but there's a couple of breaks in there for you. And enjoy my chat with Steve Shann. Without further ado, here's the interview. Well, hello and welcome everyone to the interview section of the Yorkshire Gamer podcast, and we're here for episode number 40. And I've blown the travel budget going to America in the last episode, and we're back in Yorkshire. In fact, we're actually in my house. So for the first time ever on my show, my guest is here in my games room. Since coming to Leeds in the 1980s, many of those people who I met at the local wargames club have gone on to be involved in the wargames industry in some way, and today's guest is no exception. He's a big fan of the big game and was a regular attendee at the Wargames Holiday Centre in Scarborough, and is often visible in the background of the pictures of many huge games run by previous guests Jerry Elliott, Chris Flowers and Richard Harris. But when you look at those tables, you probably won't realise until today that many of the figures that you see there have come from the paintbrushes of my guest. I'm predicting a full-on geek out about paints, techniques and the latter in the later part of the show. However, it's not all about paint, because my guest has also written a number of wargaming books, rules, articles, etc. over the years. From Leipzig to Seelow Heights and on to the Franco Prussian War, this lad knows his stuff. So let's welcome my latest guest onto the Yorkshire Gamer podcast and give a big welcome to Steve Shann. Hello, Steve.
Hi, Ken. How are you?
I'm very well, mate. Glad to have you here.
Nice
Thanks
to be
for
here.
coming over.
Pleasure.
And we were just talking before we started. We're going to have a chat about your Let's Fight Leipzig book later on. But somebody did a video of it, didn't they?
They did.
They did.
Yes.
And I don't know if you saw the bit, but they managed to get your name wrong.
In three different ways, I
In
think.
3 different ways, which was quite spectacular.
I'm used to it, yeah.
Yeah, so it's Steve Shann that we're talking to tonight. So if you've seen that video and you're expecting to speak to Steve Sean or Sean Steve or Steve Sean, then tonight I'm afraid it's Steve Shann that we're going to be talking to. So you've never done anything like this before, have you, Steve?
Never.
No. So a little bit of nerves, but don't worry about that,
yeah.
because lots of my guests who come on here are podcast virgins, as we like to call them. So we are very, very gentle. But the first thing that I want to do is to chat about your war games sort of history, if you like, and summarise it down into 4 minutes as best you can.
Yeah.
Some people are dreadful at this. Some people are really good. But we'll see how we get on. And then after we've done that, we'll expand out some topics that come up. All right.
Okay.
So I've got me button now, because we're doing this live. So I can press my button and it should record D.I. Regan telling you to shut up if you go too far. Okay. Unlike my fancy recording equipment behind me, which is crap on the internet. But there we go. So, are you ready, mate?
I am.
All right, so 4 minutes starting from now.
Right. Well, I guess like a lot of your guests, bloke of a certain age, started off with their fixed figures.
Yep.
Every Saturday morning, get my pocket money from my dad, onto the shop, add another box to the stash, started your mean to go on. And it just gradually went on from there. My dad had a mate at work who was into wargaming, and he came in one day with a book of colonial skirmish rules, and I'd be about 12 at the time, and these were really sophisticated rules. That's the first time I realised that, this isn't just about knocking them over with marbles, which is what I'd been doing up till then. And then I had a bit of luck. Me and a couple of mates got in with a group who we were playing, funnily enough, about a mile from where I live now in Wakefield.
Wow.
And they invited us over for this game. And it was a big, big game. I'd seen a couple of hundred plastic figures unpainted on a table. These guys had thousands. And we did linear. And I was 12 or 13 at the time. I didn't know the rules. So they gave me the Guard artillery.
Nice.
Very
nice start.
21 guns. 50 years later, I can still remember it. 21 guns in this grand battery facing linear.
Yeah.
And I just spent the whole weekend blowing the crap, basically, out of every Prussian unit in front of me.
Fantastic.
No tactical subtlety, because I didn't know the rules, but I didn't need any. I just spent the whole weekend doing that. But it took me 5 minutes to do my bit every move, and the rest of the time, I did what I've loved doing ever since, just wandering around the table and just gawping at the stuff. And then a bit later on, me and a couple of mates managed to convince a local vicar to let us use the hall. Unsupervised, never happened these days, would it?
No.
And we'd set up big games and we'd play. But then, I guess like you and a lot of others, university, and then I lived in Spain for a couple of years. So that, wargaming went by a little bit. But when I came back to England, I moved over to Leeds, and that was how I ended up at Leeds Wargames Club, where, I met you and a lot of the others. So it's that's pretty much what happened to me. I don't really need 4 minutes.
You don't? No, that's fine. That's fine. We're going to explore in detail a lot more some of the other stuff, and you didn't get a police inspector shouting in your ear.
I was going to make 3 minutes, did I?
2:36.
Oh,
that's not too bad at all. Not too bad at all. So that first game that you were involved in. And that's a very similar story to my own in that the people I met, we were playing Waterloo in 20mm 1/72 scale. In like the second or third game I ever played on a 20-foot table or something like that. And can you definitely see that stuck with you, and that's something that's driven you from that moment on?
Yeah. Because I think even at that age I realised these guys didn't paint these figures overnight.
Yeah.
Because they were really nice guys, and they saw 3 young lads that were enthusiastic and they wanted to encourage us in the hobby, and they gave us a few metal figures to paint. And,
oh wow!
I've sort of painted them one at a time, because these were. I mean, I couldn't afford that kind of thing when I was at that age, and that made me realise what was involved in producing something like that. Yeah.
Are those guys still around, or
some of them are?
Wow.
Yeah. In fact, one of them came to my house a few weeks ago for a copy of the Leipzig buckets. I see him at shows every now and then, but I think it was 50 years ago.
That's wonderful. It's wonderful to see, and I think a lot of friends and people that come from this hobby, and you know them for a long, long time. I mean, we must have known each other for over 30 years. I would think.
Yeah,
so it's even though we might not see each other for 10 years,
well, I've known a lot of the lads longer than I've known my wife.
Yeah, exactly. So that Linnew was your first game and your first introduction into the big games.
Yeah.
So what did you start collecting then? What was kind of your first armies that you went into?
Well, to be honest, all I could afford really at that age was 6mm stuff.
Yeah.
So I used to sort of try and pick that up, but I think that was probably later on. I think it was still the plastics and trying to paint those up, and maybe try and build up the odd battalion of metal figures as like I used to get them given from some of the lads, some of the older guys. I said they were really supportive, but.
So would it have been Heroics and Ross in those days, 6mm?
Yeah, I think they were. Yeah.
Because I had quite a few ancient armies in 6mm around that time. Again, cost, space, etc.
Yeah, definitely.
They were still massive and still huge for my mum's kitchen table, which was kind of the first battlefield that I could get hold of on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So now then, have you got a setup at home? Have you got a war games room?
Yeah, I've got the cellar.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Downstairs.
Yeah, out of the way. Yeah, problem is that it doubles as a workroom. So, every Monday, when we normally play on a Monday, I've got to clear all the stuff off the table, set out the game, and then when the lads have gone home, clear the table, get all my paints out again.
Right.
And, but it's better than nothing.
Exactly. So we'll talk about the paint setup and everything a bit later on in the show, but what's your gaming setup at home then? How big's your table? How many people come round? How does that work?
The table's 10x6, so it's a decent size. Because it's in the cellar, a bit of a low ceiling, 4 or 5 people's pretty much.
Do you have a height limit on people who can come?
Yes. If you're much more than 6'2", you're going to struggle.
That's it. You're out. You're out. How does Richard get on? Does he come down?
He bangs his head a lot.
Does he?
Yeah.
That's Richard Harris from the legendary Wargames, who I've spoken to a couple of times on the show. If you've not met him, he's a tall lad.
Yes, he is.
And he wouldn't squeeze under. He doesn't squeeze under normal doors too well.
Yeah.
And Do you do most of your gaming at home then, or do you go to a club, or where else do you go?
Mostly at home. And one of your previous guests, Chris Flowers, I go to his house for bigger games, maybe on a weekend.
Yeah.
Because I think he plays on a Thursday, but some of us still have to work for a living. So
this is the. I think we talked about the retirement group midweek.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and the ones that don't go to church who can go on a Sunday.
Yes, that's right.
It was kind of a heaven and hell split there somewhere. And you used to come along to the Leeds Wargames Club. That's kind of dropped off now. Is that because you've got your own space?
Yeah, to be fair, it probably is. I mean, you know what it's like. When you've got young kids as well. I mean, and you're working, and I ran a junior football team for 10 years.
Yes,
and,
you did, yeah.
that took up some time. Well, I mean, it's pretty much every Saturday morning and every Sunday, for the matches. So it was pretty hectic, to be honest.
So we're going to talk in detail about a lot of periods and stuff later on. But if you kind of had to summarise what you were into in terms of wargaming at a specific periods, broad range of history, what do you kind of go for?
I suppose sort of standard horse and musket, 1700 to 1900. I like Second World War. Do a fair bit of that.
Yeah.
One of my something on my to-do list is First World War as well.
Oh, right, okay.
I'm a big Lardy fan. I like their rules, and through the mud and the blood, I like the look of, and that's on my to-do list. Yeah. Not yet.
So you're not drifting back into time into spear chucking and all that sort of stuff, as we like to call it.
Well, I play that at Chris's if we go to his house, Chris Flowers' house. Yeah. But it's not a period I know anything about. So I'm quite happy to play it. I enjoy it, but it's not something I'm really invested in.
Yeah. But you've got we'll talk in detail about your books, but you've written about, from my memory, mostly that horse and musket, some into the later horse and musket as well, Franco Prussian, that sort of stuff. Yeah. Is that your kind of go-to period, or is it split out? Do you go, Frank, right, Steve, you've got to do this, Franco Prussian, or would you go Napoleonic, or how?
Well, it's a bit weird really, because Franco Prussian, it's probably the one thing I really do know something about, but I've never wargamed it.
Right, okay.
No, yeah. I've never won. I can't. I think it's because I do know quite a lot about it that I can't find a way of doing it that I'm happy with.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
Like with ancient warfare, I mean, we use Hail Caesar. I don't know anything about the period, so it doesn't rub me up the wrong way. Whatever happens, really, it's because I don't know any better.
Yeah.
So that's fine. But I guess probably the Napoleonic period, American War of Independence, I'm really keen on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting point of view. I've not really thought of that before, in that can you know too much about a period that it then subsequently puts you off wargaming it?
Well, it has put... I honestly couldn't tell you why. I like to feel when I'm playing a period that I'm playing a period.
Yeah.
It's not... I think this is why I don't go in for sort of more generic rule sets that cover like a 200-year period.
Yeah.
Because I want that period... granularity about it. It feels different. And I think with Franco Prussian, it's difficult because it's quite a complex sort of system of fighting. It's much longer ranges, and it's difficult to cross open ground, and it's difficult to sort of reflect that in a war game. Obviously it happened in the real battles, but to reflect it on the war games table, I've never been able to do it in a way I'm comfortable with.
Do you find that people or rules that you've seen for Franco Prussian War are tending to count it as an extension of the Napoleonic period in what they're trying to do with the rule?
I think to some extent that is true. Or maybe the American Civil War.
Right. Yes.
Maybe that a bit more, but I don't know. It's one of those. It's that kind of conflict where they're trying to get away from the Napoleonic formations and tactics, but they can't quite manage it.
Right.
But they've got weapons that mean you really ought to try, because it's not safe.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I find difficult to model on the table. I mean, you could do. I think there's a set of rules called, is it Bloody Big Battles?
Yes, Neil
they
Thomas, is it?
They look pretty interesting. Because I think he takes it from quite a high command level and does it that way. I think that sounds promising.
A couple of people have mentioned that on here before.
Right.
A friend of mine, Stephen Barker, who's the author and historian, who's just got back into wargaming. He's using those, and he's full of praise for them. So
right.
It's not something I've looked at, and it's something that I'll probably need to get my hands on and have a look at. But I think that when you're passionate about a period and you know a lot about it, you can be a little bit defensive about it. Because I've had that recently with the Italian wars, because it's kind of, it's like, it's my period, I know what it's, and then this never mind the billhooks Wars of the Roses set suddenly sticks in as an addendum.
Yes.
Like 18 pages, and it's like, that's my favourite period. You can't do that.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm used to it where the Franco Prussian War is concerned. Because when people say what you're really interested in, I tell them that. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And do you think that is down to a lack of British involvement?
I think it's more down to a lack of British books.
Right.
Because there's just so little available. I mean, it's just one of those sort of serendipity things. I just hit lucky that when I came back from Spain, my dad was a mature student at Leeds Uni. And he said, look, I'm going in tomorrow. I've got some work to do in the library. Why don't you come in? Have a look round. So I thought, well, why not? And while he was doing what he was doing, I was just wandering around the stacks having a look. And I just turned a corner and there was about 4 shelves packed with stuff. But it was the right stuff. Yeah. It was all the French General Staff account with all the after-action reports and the just unbelievable detail. Yeah. And I was sort of gainfully unemployed at the time, so I was down there every day, just making notes, and that's really how it all started. Because I started off with Michael Howard's book, which most people have come across that they've got any interest in it, but I couldn't find much else until until I turned up there, and it was a game changer.
I think it's an issue. I mean, obviously, recently I've been doing the Garibaldi stuff that I knew absolutely nothing about until I started doing that. Italian Wars stuff, there's very little in the English language that's new. Yeah. There's lots of books, but they're all people copying off other ones. There's nothing new in it. And speaking to my previous guest, Martin Kelly, he's very keen on getting books in the source language. Yeah. It's Italian books and he's finding loads of really interesting stuff in those books. So it's definitely something to look for.
Language is always going to be a barrier, you know. Yeah. I mean, I don't speak German, and my French is okay. I mean, it's good enough for what I need. If you're really interested in the period, it is difficult because there isn't that much in English.
Yeah. Regular listeners to this will know that all my foreign language skills are absolutely atrocious. And I can probably order a coffee in about 3 languages. Yeah. And that's it. And then I know the phrase that basically says, apologies, I'm English and I can't speak your language.
Yeah, that's a useful one,
which is always a way forward. Rule-wise then, what sort of rules do you go for? In the Grand Manor, I take it, you still into those? Or have you gone off them now?
That's a bit of a bone of contention.
Oh,
really.
Dear.
Yeah, you've struck a bit of a sore spot there, because there's a bit of a running battle at the moment.
Okay, this is interesting.
Yeah, the linear game I mentioned, the rules they were using were pretty much in the Grand Manor, one of the very early versions. And at the time, they were revolutionary. I remember going to a show not long after I got back from Spain, and Pete Gilder was actually running it. And I joined in and played for like a couple of turns. And compared to what was available, the sort of WRG, which not really aimed at big battles, they were revolutionary. But it's, they're 40 odd years old.
They are, yes.
And
you reminded us how old we are.
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah. Exactly. We're the best one in the world. They still work. Yeah. It's just for the really big games, I think they're a bit process heavy, they're a bit slow. Most of the lads don't agree. They're quite happy to spend 2 or 3 days playing a game, which if you're retired and you've got the time, that's lovely.
That's fine,
I like to get a result within a weekend if I can. Yeah. So, yeah.
So what have you moved towards then in terms of rules? What sort of style or any particulars?
Well, as I said, I'm quite a fan of the Lardy rules. I like the friction in their rules. I like card-driven rules.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I want to use them all the time, but I think they make a nice change. I like the way that there's no move sequence.
Yes.
You haven't got that security blanket to hold on to. You know, that he's fired at me now, so he can't fire at me again for at least half an hour. You know, you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You've got to manage the game as it develops. So I do quite like that. So I've tried writing a couple of sets of rules myself just to sort of, factor that into the kind of games I'm playing. Lardy rules. I like Dave Brown's rules. I thought General Darmé were a really, really nice set of rules.
Yeah. We've played General of the Brigade quite a lot. And we had a go of O Group last night.
Yeah, I like those as well.
They're very good.
Yeah, they are.
And I think Dave seems to have bridged that gap between the older generation of rules and the newer ones.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Because a lot of modern sets of rules, I find that there's not a lot of detail in there.
No.
Whereas Dave's has got the detail in, but when you actually come to play the game, it's a relatively simple process, but it brings the detail in.
Yeah, I thought General Darmé did that in spades, really, because you've got that granularity. You've still got infantry battalions firing volleys. You've even got skirmishers.
Yeah.
But it's not really abstracted. You feel like you're doing that sort of nuts and bolts of the battle. Yeah. So I'd agree. He's got a second edition coming out, hasn't he?
Yes, soon. I think he has. Yeah. Whether I've saw something that there was a lot of factors are coming out and it's been more dice based. So whether I'm going to like that or not, I don't know.
No, I heard some rumours that was the way it was going, which I thought was a pity because I thought he'd got the balance.
Yeah,
right.
I did as well. Yeah, and it's one of those things where you think it just needs a tweak rather than cutting up and shaking up and a complete rewrite. But there we go. Where do you get your stuff from then? Where do you buy your hobby purchases? Have you got a shop that you go to or an online store that you use all the time? Or do you blag them off mates?
If I can. No, I usually go straight to the manufacturer. Or, of course, Partisan. That's my twice a year.
Is that the shopping trip?
Yeah, it's a shopping trip and then a good 5-hour go-up at the games.
Yeah, a small sort of 7.5 ton truck.
Yeah, exactly. That sort of thing. Twice a year.
Do you spend a lot of time at shows or do you concentrate on Partisan?
I've never gone to loads, but to be honest, now it is pretty much Partisan. Yeah. I mean, they're nicely spaced out and... what is it, May and it's October now, isn't it? So they've changed it, but it does seem
to attract. I'm going to get in trouble for this. I'm going to say it: the best of the games in terms of visual appeal, and I think. I've said this before. There's nothing wrong with gaming however you want to game, but if I'm paying to see you game. I want to see a good table.
Yeah,
I can go to the club on a Wednesday night and it doesn't cost me anything. But you know what I mean.
I do.
And I can see two mates playing a game across the table. It doesn't really matter what it looks like.
No.
So do you enjoy that wandering around and having a look at the tables and seeing what people are doing?
I do, because I think probably the biggest enjoyment for me, apart from obviously the company, is the way a game looks.
Yeah.
And you just get endless inspiration at Partisan. Yeah. I don't know whether it's true, but I heard that Duncan used to take a lot of the photos at the show, and I think that just encouraged people to sort of up their game with the hope that they'd end up in the magazine. But why not?
Yeah, why not? Why not indeed? And it's a very well run show.
Yeah.
I'm always impressed with it.
What do you think of the venue?
There's a long and funny story that I've told before about me failing to get to Kelham Hall. Oh, right. It was like it was a curse.
Yeah.
So I would always be working on that day, and I couldn't get it off, or something would happen on the Friday night and I couldn't get there. And one famous occasion, I got within 20 miles of the venue, and my phone went, and it was work, and I had to go back. And those people who know what I do, when that phone goes, I have to go back. There's no, sorry, I'm going somewhere. It's like, right, I'm on my way back now. So I never got there. And then since it's gone to the new, is it the Stevenson Hall? I can never remember the name of it. I think it's Stevenson Hall. I've been quite a few times, and I enjoy it because you get the great games. You get a big mix of people from the north and south because it's in the middle.
Yeah.
and there's always people to talk to there that I probably wouldn't get to see at Fiasco or any of the northern shows.
Yeah, I have a sore throat the day after every partisan because I see people like that's the only time I see them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to be there. And just a reminder for the Wargames press, because I know some of you listen, there are shows north of Nottingham. Just in case you missed it, there are shows north of Nottingham, just in case you didn't know. But we'll just drop that one in. So that's another 5 or 6 emails generated just by that one comment. But we don't mind emails on the show. We don't mind them at all. Most of them are quite positive, to be fair. So we'll just finish off this section now, and we talk about a thing called the Venn diagram of wargaming that you've heard about on the show before, and it's just a nice little way I found of kind of summarising where people sit in the wargaming hobby, because you have people who solely drive to the game. You have people like me. I mean, you sat here and there's a 12x6 table that's literally held up with figures. So I'm a collector and a painter. So. Wargamer, painter, collector, historian. How do you feel about those four and how do they fit together?
They all apply. Even though I've been painting for a living for over 30 years, I've never considered myself to be a painter.
Right.
If that makes sense, yeah. For me, it's a means to an end. You know, I want to get figures on the table.
Yeah.
I can't afford to pay somebody else to do it, so I'll do it myself.
Yeah.
It's not. I don't mind it. I mean, it's better than working in an office or being a teacher or any other job I might have done.
Sure.
It suits me fine. But yeah, it's a means to an end. It's either making a living or getting figures on the table to play. I'm a wargamer more than I'm a painter or a collector. Yeah.
But do you, and I think you do, enjoy the history side of it as well? Because you were talking earlier on about being in the university and looking at all those books and seeing them and gravitating to the really good ones, as you called them.
Yeah.
Is that a drive as well, that research and looking into?
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I mentioned I was thinking of doing World War One. The Lardy rules through the mud and the blood. I've already bought half a dozen Ospreys just to do a bit of background reading before I even start. I haven't bought a figure yet. But I do like to sort of know a little bit about what's going on. Yeah. I had a really big Grand Alliance, 9 Years War collection.
Oh yes, yeah.
And it's really nice. I was really pleased with it, but there's no material out there. It's worth the Franco Prussian War. You can't find anything. So I ended up selling it to a guy in Germany because I didn't know enough about what I was trying to do, and so it didn't hold my interest for that reason. But yeah.
And as time has gone by, then with the history and the uniform side of things, do you still gravitate towards books, or have you now started to use the internet as a main resource? How do the two mix together?
Well, I'm old enough to prefer
in your hand,
copy in my handbook that I can sit down.
I've paid for it. I want something I can hold.
Yeah. Where the internet has made a massive difference, along with digital printing, is being able to get hold of stuff. Because I used to get catalogues sent from all over, particularly all over France, when I was looking for some of the more detailed special stuff. And every now and then I'd find something, but it was very hit and miss. Yeah. Whereas now you can go on the internet and somebody will have reprinted it somewhere. There's a company in India that reprints all sorts of obscure stuff. Yeah. I've got dozens and dozens of books from them. So
I found and though we're in Yorkshire, I don't mind paying for books. Just get that out now. But I did go online looking. I was looking for, because I'm really interested in the Mesopotamian campaign in World War One, because I had family members who fought in it. And I can't remember, it's some university or learning establishment in the Middle East. They have the official histories as PDF downloads.
Oh,
because they're over, is it 75 years or 100 years? I can't remember. There's a cut-off point, isn't there, where a book becomes, the author no longer gets royalties.
It's just public property. That's right.
So I'm not. Everyone listening, I'm not cheating. So I found that extremely useful, just because they're really. The Imperial War Museum did a reprint a few years ago, so you can get them now. But originally, you were kind of in a second-hand bookshop in the middle of Wales in the 1980s, and you might find one next to cookery with something.
The number of book fairs I've been to and found nothing, but every now and then you hit Yeah, jackpot. Yeah, I came across something online, a French site, Gallia, I think it was called, and they've got literally thousands of books on sort of Napoleonic Wars, Franco Prussian, mainly French history, and you can just download them. It's fantastic.
It's fantastic resource. There was somebody arguing with me on the internet yesterday, which happens regularly, about a certain vehicle at Kursk, and a few years ago I found an American study that lists every single vehicle at Kursk and when it was in service. This is on a daily basis, whether it was in service, damaged, destroyed, being repaired, or so I just went, well, I think you'll actually find on this. I've got my new favourite saying now is it's not my first sheepdog trial. Because we don't have many rodeos in Yorkshire, so it's no point saying it's my first rodeo. But it's opened up a new thing for people, hasn't it? It makes research a lot easier.
It makes communicating with other people a lot easier as well. You come across somebody who maybe, and you can contact them easily with an email, and you get a reply within a day, and it just makes life so much easier. Yeah, it does,
without a shadow of a doubt. So, just before we finish this section off, social media, it's not your big thing. No. Are you on? I think you're on Facebook, aren't you?
Well, only in the sense that
you have.
There's I do. There's lots of stuff on Facebook that I like to look at. Yeah. But I don't use it in that sense. I mean, you see, some games you see. Yeah. You think, oh, that's fantastic, and you put a comment on it. It's a really nice game. But that's it. Really.
Do you? I mean, we'll talk about the painted and stuff in the final section. But do you have a website for that, or is that all done word of mouth?
I started a blog about 12 or 13 years ago. With, Nations in Arms, and I get a few people following that, and that's just my own amusement. I just post things on figures I've painted, or maybe there's something I'm working on, but. Yeah. I don't post very often. I'm a bit of a disgrace, really.
Well, you're a working man, mate. You need to.
Yeah, well, that's what I keep telling you. So it's a pathetic excuse. You can always find time if you really want to.
You probably can. You probably can. Well, thanks very much for that introduction, Steve. Very good. Thanks for that. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment, and we're going to talk about big games. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're back for the second part of the show, and as regular listeners will know, it's all about the big game. It's in the title, so if you're surprised, I'd check your understanding of the English language is probably the way to look at it. So the question that I start this off with everyone, Steve, is what does a big game mean to you? What does it conjure in your mind?
I think what I find exciting about them is it's something that I can't do on my own, by definition, really. Because I'm lucky I've got a 10-foot table, but it's okay. But a big game is bigger than that. Yeah, and it's multiple people, hopefully people you've known for a long time. Yeah. When we first started at the Leeds Club, a group of us would do the shows at Derby and Sheffield. You remember those? Yeah. What was the Sheffield venue? Was it the Octagon?
Octagon, yeah.
It was like a rabbit warren, wasn't it? But
amazing,
fantastic place. And I used to look forward to that every year.
Yeah, I did as well.
And we decided what we were going to do. A big game, and the planning of it, painting figures for it, which often boiled down to me doing most of them, making the terrain, and just looking forward to it. And then you've got 2 days of just playing.
Yeah, I think I'm. There's a guy who was quite heavily involved in the show, who's going to come on in a few months' time, and I'm really looking forward to talking about those glory days of triples, because I had that same feeling. I really look forward to it, and there was a character to the venue, whereas now, I mean, it was difficult to find stuff, and everything was all over the place.
Parking was terrible.
Terrible. Nowadays, I think that most shows are in some soulless barn. Yeah. And, even parties aren't. There's not a lot of...
It's handy and it's convenient.
Yeah. It's lost the soul that it had at Kelham Hall, even though, I mean, I know, as we said earlier, I never made it. But apparently the lighting was absolutely dreadful.
Lovely building, lovely venue, but the lighting was terrible.
I mean, that must be what? 16th, 17th century, was it? I don't know when was it?
Yeah, I think it's an old seminary, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, so
you can probably imagine in 1760 the lighting in there wasn't particularly good either.
No.
It's not
Especially
designed
candles,
for that at all, is it? Does scale make a difference to you with a big game in terms of figures?
The size of the figures? Well, yeah, I'm a bit 28. Really.
28, yeah. No, that's not worse.
Yeah.
Because I've seen some stuff recently that Jerry Elliott springs to mind.
Yeah.
And he's doing how, in my perception, big games should be done in smaller scales. In that he's using a similar footprint and putting more figures on it.
Yeah,
and that does look good.
Yeah.
That does look good. Gives it something else. And is that the appeal for you then, that friends, time together?
Yeah, I mean, in general terms, I'm probably not the most sociable person in the world, to be honest. But, you know, when you get together with a group of guys you've known for a long time, it's a hobby you all love, and you know, you get all these lovely figures out on equally lovely terrain, and just for a couple of days, just forget everything that's going on around you, and just.
Yeah. Do you find that additional time allows you to explore a battle in more detail?
I think it's more difficult now because the 2-day show seems to have
gone,
doesn't it? Really,
it's sad, really.
Yeah, it is. Because I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure we could manage it now because it was bloody hard work, as I remember. But you know, you have to sort of get up at very early on Saturday morning, and then it's down there, set up, play, back home, then same again the next day.
We need those little electric wheelchairs to go around it.
Yeah, you're not joking. Yeah, I think we would. But so I think with like one day, you're still limited what you can do. It doesn't matter how big the table is.
Yeah.
You've only got maybe, if you're lucky, 4 or 5 hours playing time. So yeah, that is a bit of a limiting factor. But
and you're more, I think, on a 1-day show, you've got more interaction with the public and it's what used to you would get over 2 days is now compacted into 1 day.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for you to move the game on.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we're there for at the end of the day, is to promote the hobby. So I mean, you can't just ignore the public. I mean, it's
some of them you can.
Yeah. There's always one, isn't there? But, I mean, we put on a game at Partisan. It's quite a few years back now, and I noticed while we were playing, this same guy kept coming back every 40 minutes, an hour, and he'd just have a look at the game and he'd wander off and he'd come back. And at the end of the day, he came over and he said, it's a really nice game, really enjoyed that. He said, what I enjoyed most was listening to you taking the piss out of each other all day. He said, you've obviously known each other a long time. He said, where I live, there aren't any war gamers. So,
that's a shame.
You know,
that's a shame. I do feel for people who are quite isolated in this hobby. And I know some people listen to this podcast and it's kind of a connection with other war gamers who they might not necessarily get to see. And I'm in a similar position to you in that I've had a group of friends who I've gamed with virtually all my life, who are some of my best friends as well. And that aspect of it does make a huge difference, doesn't it?
Well, it does. I mean, you know, stuff happens in everybody's life, doesn't it? You know, you have the low points, and it's just something that's always there. It's that one constant, you know, that you can always disappear off to the war games room and paint a few figures. And
Exactly. So, you know, you know, your partners will bugger off and leave you for somebody else, but your figures will always be there.
Oh, yeah.
So what, if I asked you then what some of the big games that you've played in that kind of spring to mind as being, that was a cracker?
I think the first one I did at the Wargames Holiday Centre was Leipzig. And
Start small.
Yes, that's a start you need to go on. Yeah. I mean that's just a belter again.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it. I was playing against Pete Morby of Elite Miniatures the whole weekend. Yeah. He had the French Guard, the entire French Guard. So it was quite a hard weekend, but great fun. And I mean,
episode 9, ladies and gentlemen. Pete.
Yeah. So that was pretty good. I was lucky enough to be invited to the 175th anniversary of the Waterloo at the Wargames Holiday Centre when Peter was there. You know, Peter Giller was there. It was his last game, and that was a bit bittersweet, really, because I mean it was a fantastic game, and he was so bloody cheerful. I mean, he was pretty much paralysed. I mean, you know, we were having to feed him, even, you know, just you could just see the pleasure he was still getting from the hobby. Even you know, I mean, I think he died a few months later, but that was. That taught me something, I think, that, no matter how bad things are, you can still enjoy wargaming.
I've spoken to a few people now who were at that game. And although it is tinged with sadness in that it was Peter's last game, he had a last game and he did seem to enjoy it.
Well, he did. I mean, as it panned out towards the end of the game, he was commanding, and somebody else was moving the figures for him, of course, but he was commanding the French Guard cavalry, and I'd got some British light cavalry brigades opposite him, and we were fighting this series of cavalry melees, and I mean, even somebody else having to throw the dice for him, but he was still looking at the dice and counting up how many sixes there were, making sure I was throwing the right number of dice as well, probably. But, I think it was competitive to the end. But.
Oh, brilliant. So when did you first meet Peter then?
I think it was Leipzig, which was quite a few years before. I mean, it was quite a long time before, and because he was still running the centre then, and I think like everybody else, you walk through the doors, and even when you've seen big games, you haven't seen anything like that, because it's not just the tables; it's just the fact that this is for you. This is a purpose-built facility for you to use. It's the cabinets on the wall, and you're full of figures.
I think I've spoken to a few people now and got them to describe that feeling as they go through the door, and everyone is the same. It's just like, wow. If this is your hobby, I don't think you can fail to have walked through that door and just had your jaw drop on the floor.
No. Well, if I die and I'm proved wrong and I go to heaven, it'll be sort of, this is all right. Yeah, no, it was amazing.
I'm sure if you made it upstairs, listen to the episode of Robbie Roddis if you want to decide which way you went, up or down. That he'll have his own wargame centre up in heaven, which will be a perfect place for the likes of us to go. So, were you fairly regular at the Wargames Holiday Centre? How often would you go?
Oh no, I mean, if I went every couple of years, but I went enough that I really appreciated the place, and I went when Mike Ingham took over. I went a few times. I think we did a big D-Day game there once, and that's what we play tested the game before he actually put it on at the centre when he did bouts. That was a good punch up as well. That was he invited a few people. It's mainly the sods, the Seelow lads that went up there, and we play tested that for him, and that was good.
Were you part of the Leeds Wargames Club group that used to go up? Did you go up there, or did you go up on separate weekends?
No, I think I went with them. I went with them once when we did the big D-Day game, but no. Other than that, I think I went either on my own or with one friend.
Interesting. I didn't know whether you were part of the Leeds crowd who used to go, because I never used to go. I was always a bit short on money at the time.
Yeah, well, me too. Yeah,
it was a little bit out of my reach at the time.
Yeah.
As wargaming's gone over the years, we seem to be getting smaller and smaller on the tables and what have you. What do you think that drive is? Is it coming from manufacturers, or where do you think it's coming from?
Do you know, I don't know. I mean, I've heard a lot of people talking about this recently, and they talk about short attention spans and sort of instant gratification, all the rest of it. But I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I believe that. I think if you're coming into any hobby, you need to get in there and get your feet wet as quick as possible. And no matter how much money you've got, you're not going to be able to get the kind of setup you and I are lucky to have now. So you've got to start somewhere. But I suppose it depends how passionate you are about the hobby. I mean, there were golfers and there were golfers, there were wargames and there were wargames. Yeah. Some people, it's something they do once they're in with their friends at the club, and they get on with the rest of their lives. But
I think the pair of us had that very similar experience early on. In that I got into the group I got playing with initially back in Cheshire was huge tables. That experience of you playing Linyi, I wasn't frightened of that experience. No. Did it? And it encouraged you to
definitely. Yeah. I mean, when I first met Chris Flowers that we were talking about earlier, and he was playing with the Sods then that Seelow group. I mean, I looked at the setup they had, and I mean, it's just thousands of figures, very nicely painted as well, custom built terrain. And I thought, this is what I want. But I had the wit to realise it wasn't going to happen overnight. You've got to think long term, I think, in this hobby. I don't have a problem with that. I'm a big believer in deferred gratification. I think.
I like that word.
Yeah, I think if you I like planning projects They don't always come off, but that part of it, I think, well, this is what I need to start, get it on the table, and then I need to expand it by doing this, that, or the other. So, yeah, I just think, I don't think you can generalise. It comes down to individual people and what they want.
It surprises me, and I talked about this with Nick Skinner, and I appreciate Nick isn't the big businessman when it comes to wargaming.
No.
But I kind of said, if Too Fat Lardies sold figures, would their rules be for bigger games?
That's a sneaky question.
It is a sneaky question, and bless him, Nick, he took it very well. But that's what you spend all this money getting people into your period or your game through Kickstarter or however you do it, and then it just stops. Whereas I think if you've got somebody hooked, you're probably the wrong metaphor to use or the wrong thing to use, but if you've just sold somebody some drugs and they've got it, then you don't walk away. You go, would you like some more drugs?
I think the one thing that has changed in the last sort of, I don't know, maybe 10 years is the turnover of stuff. I mean, I remember when like, for example, Rapid Fire Rules came out. I'd been following what Colin and Richard had been doing in the magazines, and as soon as they came out, I bought them, and I introduced the rest of the lads to them, and we took them straight away, and we still use them, 25 years later. Yeah. I think now stuff comes out, and it's popular for a year or two, and it just seems to fade. And I mean, okay, some rules have got more legs than others, I guess, but I think maybe another thing about it as well is it's a lot easier to produce stuff. Technically, like printing stuff is a lot simpler than it used to be. 20 years ago, it was expensive to produce a set of rules or a scenario book or whatever it might be. Whereas now, with digital printing, you can run off 200 copies and it's doable.
Yeah, it's definitely changed. It definitely changed in that aspect. We'll see what happens. I think when I started this podcast 2 years ago now, I was getting to the stage where I was thinking, am I the only one? Am I the only person left who does big games? And judging by the number of people who listen to this, I'm not by a long way.
No, not by a long way.
It's just we seem to have retreated into our little silos and our little cellars and
I wonder if it's
attic
an age
rooms
thing.
and not shouting from the rooftops.
Yeah, I wonder if it's a generational thing because a lot of the guys that are doing it, I suppose by definition, it takes a while to build up the kind of collections we're talking about. But yeah, I came across something on Facebook. This guy had done a beautiful 7 years war game with some of his mates. It was like a 20-foot table and got in his house. What looked like several thousand gorgeous figures. I don't think he advertises himself particularly. He just said, I put this game on, and I was thinking, wow, that's...
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
But I think we, and obviously generalising a little bit, but I think when we were younger, we were pulling on the coattails of those people who were doing that, going, oh, can I ever go at that?
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was very lucky meeting those group of guys who were, I guess they'd have been 15, 16 years older than me. Yeah. So that, they were working, they'd got disposable cash, they've got decent collections, and they were willing to let some clumsy kid play with them, which I thought was, hey, I'm not sure I'd have done the same thing when I was their age, to be honest.
Yeah, very kind of. I mean, I've got my World War II ships behind me, and there's no kids touching them. No. Trust me. These bits fall off them when I touch them, never mind anybody else. So I think it would be a good point to stick in the show a little bit of a chat about your Leipzig book. We're talking about big games, and we'll talk about other stuff that you've done an author in later on, but I thought this would be a good part to talk about the book. And I've got a copy in front of me. Obviously, it's an audio podcast, so that's sod all used to everyone who's listening. But I've got it in my hand to refer to. And of course, I was hoping that Steve Shann was going to be here tonight.
Sorry about that.
But
the imposter.
The imposter. Steve Shann's here to talk about the book. So, where did the idea for the book come? How did you start with it?
It was issues 4 and 5, I think, of Wargames Illustrated.
Wow,
that's where the title came from.
Yep.
Peter Gilder's,
yep.
Let's Fight Leipzig. Somebody, I don't think he ever got full credit for what he did for the hobby. Yes. I don't think.
It's something I've tried to put right as much as I can on this podcast and talk about Peter all the time and get people on who knew him.
Yeah.
Because you're right, he's not talked about in the way that he should be.
Well, I mean, people like Don Featherstone and Charles Grant and Charlie Wisencraft and all the rest of them. I mean, obviously they were massive figures in the hobby.
Yeah.
But Peter did sort of things that they didn't. I mean, he designed figures.
Yeah.
He painted beautifully. I mean, their stuff tended to be, no disrespect, functional. It did the job, but he was a real painter, wasn't he?
Yeah, he put on a table, didn't he?
Well, he did. I think that's the thing, that it wasn't just the figures; it was the terrain. I think that's what stood out. That his terrain was just on a different level, several levels above what anybody else was doing. And I think when I first got hold of Wargames Illustrated, I was looking at the photo. Wow, I've never seen anything like this before, and it was really inspiring. I think if I had to point to one person, it probably would be Pete Gilder. I think that's my sort.
Yeah, those early copies that you're talking about, those early books, they would have. I can't remember whether it was 5 or 6 pages that were colour, and everything else was black and white, and everyone kind of gravitated to one of the pictures, and mine was always the Italian War Gendarmes.
Yeah, lovely.
And I've spoken to somebody. And apologies if I get the terminology wrong because it changes every week. The Indigenous American on the front of one of them with the feathered headdress that had all been made from solder. And, so just amazing. And it was those two editions with the Leipzig stuff in.
Well, that was what he chose to call it. Was Let's Fight Leipzig, and I thought, what a great title for a scenario book. So yeah.
So when you decided to put it together, then what was your kind of checklist? What were you going to do with the book?
Well, a couple of years, 2 or 3 years ago, I started work on the Seelow Heights book, which was the first scenario book that I did. Yeah. And I did a demo game at Partisan back in 2013. It was just it was just a campaign that really interested me. Completely one-sided. I mean, the war was over, the Germans had lost, it was done and dusted. But there was just something about it that I found really interesting. Yeah. So I did that, and then I thought I'd like to do something similar for the Napoleonic Wars. And as I say, I just came across the magazine afterwards and thought that'd be a good one. And of course, it's a massive battle. And I like to do maybe a dozen scenarios in the book, so you've got a fair bit of choice. And Leipzig was big enough that you could do that. Yeah, that's probably why I went for it.
Just looking at it and the general layout and look of it. Really nice pictures in there. So who's done those and where are the figures from?
I wrote it, but that's all.
Right, okay.
Yeah. My sister-in-law trained as a graphic designer.
Right, wow.
She did the maps.
Fantastic.
I sort of explained to her what it was I had in mind, and we sort of tweaked it a little bit with the Seelow Heights book, and then I think we got it right with this one. So she did the maps and all of the layout, and an old friend of ours from the Leeds Wargame Club, John Smith, did the photos for me.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Oh, he's a fantastic photographer. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have done it without both of them, really. So yeah, it was thanks to them really that I was able to sort of bring it to completion.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realise that with the maps, because the maps are really good. They're informative, but they're also look like a Wargames table.
Well, hopefully that was the idea.
Yeah. Well, no,
some bird's eye view, looking down. Yeah,
it does sound daft, but sometimes I look at a map in a scenario book, and it's like, oh yeah, that's really nice. That's brilliant. If I was a topographical sculptor working for an archaeologist, but I'm not. I'm a wargamer.
No, exactly. Yeah.
And I've got a few hills, and I've got a few trees, and I've got some roads. Yeah. How am I going to lay that out on the table? Just looking at this, you've done all this yourself, haven't you? You've not gone to Ricewitz or Helion or anyone like that.
Well, as I said earlier, with digital printing, it's doable. You're not going to make a fortune out of it. You do it because you enjoy it, But if it pays for itself and buys a few figures, then
brilliant. Absolutely,
it works.
Yeah, I didn't realise you'd done that, and that's amazing that you've got that together. And done it that way. Oh, and I can see that we mentioned the collection of Chris Flowers in here.
Yeah, they're all either my figures or Chris's. Yeah,
which is good. Is it designed for a specific set of rules, or have you tried to incorporate others within it?
No, I wanted to leave that open, and things like table size, I left that sort of fairly open as well, because you don't need a 10 by 60 war game with 6mm figures, So it's and to be fair, it's not aimed at beginners. It's aimed at people like you and me,
Yeah.
sort of veteran war gamers that have got collections and they know what to do. They know how to set.
Yeah.
It's basically just there to give 12 off-the-shelf games, I suppose, for people that are interested.
So what sort of size games are most of the scenarios? Are they similar size, or are they...
No, I tried to vary them a little bit, but I did like an introductory chapter to just say, look, this is a way of doing it. These are the orders of battle, and this is, maybe the kind of table you want. But if you don't have this number of figures, then divide it by 2/3. It's not. Or if you're lucky like us and you were playing at Chris's, then double it. Yeah, and they've done that. They've played a couple of the games and they've just doubled the number of figures because they've got the figures and they've got the room.
Yeah.
So as long as you do it proportionally, it doesn't make any difference. But
Brilliant.
it's just a dozen scenarios that are just ready to go.
You've got my favourite battle of all time, Liebe Voltowitz.
Yep.
I love that battle. It's just acres of cavalry, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Shall I move the infantry now? Sod the infantry. Let's move all our cavalry forward, which is brilliant. An interesting point that I'm interested in your opinion on this is that recently, this is just me being annoying everyone. Most cavalry regiments on tables are 12 figures.
Right.
And is that because everyone sells them in 12 figures?
That's very cynical. It might be that 12 figures is enough to paint, really.
It is, but if you remember back in the day and at the Wargames Holiday Centre, Austrian cavalry regiments were like 48 figures.
They could be, yeah.
In 28 mil.
Yeah.
They weren't 12 figures.
No, they weren't.
So I'm kind of seeing 30-figure foot battalions, which are 600-700 men usually, and a cavalry regiment of 12 figures.
Yeah.
Well, that isn't
No.
250-300 men, in which if the...
No, I'm wrestling with this at the moment because another project that I want to do when I've retired is 7 Years' War.
Yes.
And I was thinking 30-figure infantry battalions, 5 bases of 6, flags in the middle, looks nice and symmetrical.
Yeah.
And I was thinking 10 or 12
Yeah.
cavalry figures because it's not too difficult to paint in single rank.
Yeah.
But then again, really, I'd like to do 20 figures or 24 figures in 2 ranks.
Yeah, most, because I've got big 7 Years' War in 15 mil. Most, certainly French cavalry are only 2 squadrons, so quite small.
Yeah.
But some of the bigger Austrian ones are 5 or 6 squadrons big. So what I've done is I've done a squadron as a base.
Yeah.
And then, so some of them are just 2 bases and some of them are like that big with 6 or 8 bases. I think there's one of the French regiments, I think it's Commissary General's Regiment.
Oh, yeah.
It's like 12 squadrons or something like that.
Was that Prussian, is it Bayreuth Dragoons? It's 10 squadrons. It's huge, isn't it? Double-sized regiment.
Yeah. So there's such a big difference between the sizes of the units in some of the armies.
Well, I must admit that's one thing I can't get too hung up about is unit sizes. Because what I tend to do is I like to play at a fairly high command level. So I might want a game on a 10-foot table with maybe a couple of corps on each side. So I'm not representing battalion for battalion. A battalion might be representing, 1,000 men or 1,200 men. So the size of the unit, it doesn't matter too much. It might be representing 1 Austrian battalion or maybe 2 French ones. So and the same with the cavalry. So I don't get too worked up about unit sizes.
It's definitely a question for everyone out there. Is that are cavalry units now all 12 figures because that's how many figures are in a box?
Yeah.
And I'm kind of telling you
that
I am right.
Yeah, you might have a point. Yeah.
What have you gone to try and introduce like a flavour of the different games? Have you included like special rules or stuff like that? How's that work?
Yeah, it follows the same format basically. You get the orders of battle, obviously where you deploy, victory conditions, where reinforcements arrive, that kind of thing, what you'd expect. But if there was anything that happened that was a bit different, I'd try and include it as a special rule and maybe suggest how you do it. Obviously, how you do it is going to depend on what rules you're using. So, something like maybe black powder, your cavalry might be moving 54 inches, whereas in sort of grandmother it might be 10, So you've got to play back with it a little bit. But yeah, there's special rules in there.
And has there been any attempt to balance it for both sides, or have you tried to keep to historical unbalance?
Yeah. Well, Leipzig helps you out a bit there because the battles, it depends where you draw the line on the map. Because the Allies sort of attacked in sort of what they call columns.
Yeah.
And depending on who was against them, you can sort of play about with a little bit. And I mean, sometimes, in the scenario book, there were a couple of battles where the same regiment features in 2 scenarios because they were there in the morning, but they were somewhere else in the afternoon. You kept busy, yeah. We're actually putting one of these games on at Partisan in May.
Oh, brilliant!
One of them from the books.
Yeah.
So,
that'll be great to see. I'll come along and definitely have a look. Have you tied them all together in a monster game at the end of it, or what was you thinking on that?
I didn't, because unless you're actually going to refight Leipzig, I don't see how you can, really.
Yeah.
No. I mean, we've done that, and why not?
Yeah. It's a daunting challenge, isn't it?
It is.
It is a daunting challenge. But then I think if there was a wargaming bucket list, it would definitely.
Well, of course, the problem with Leipzig is that it doesn't matter how big a table you've got. It's not big enough, because it's not the width of it. It's the fact that you need at least 2.
Yes.
Because the French are in the middle, aren't they?
Yeah.
They've got allies on one side and the allies on the other side. So
when we played the game back in the early 90s, we were considerably younger than we are now.
Yes.
And we had a giant. We had about a 12-foot 6 by 6 foot hole in the middle of the table.
Yeah.
That we crawled underneath, and the French effectively fought back to back.
That's right. Yeah.
Which was a really good experience, because I was on the northern flank fighting the Prussians, I think it was, and I had no idea what was going on behind me.
No,
because you're so engrossed, and that would be so. That's realistic in terms of what a corps commander would know.
Yeah, well, of course, that's how they did it at the Wargames Holidays, didn't it? Because you had the French players with the 2 sort of 27 by 6 tables, front and back, and they were fighting back to back against the allies that were closing in. And
there was a minor complaint on the video, and that was that the Swedes aren't in.
Yeah.
So
yes, that's right.
Have you got any particular hatred against the Swedish nation?
No, I haven't.
I have to say that this podcast is exceptionally popular in Finland.
Oh.
It's been no idea why, but I have been number 1 in the gaming podcast chart in Finland on 2 or 3 occasions, and there's a podcast called Critical Role.
Yeah,
I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, I haven't.
But it's like D&D.
Yeah,
and they sell out arenas for this show in America. It's massive, and I regularly beat them in Finland. I don't know what. Finland, I love you.
Oh, fantastic. Well, look, to be fair, as the guy himself said, I know they didn't do much. And that was why. They didn't do enough to sort of feature in any of the games.
Yeah, but I'm kind of feeling a little bit sorry, because these are, in my group back in Cheshire, Pete Clayton, bless you if you're listening, mate, he had a Swedish army. And I can just, there's always one, isn't there, in the group. And you're like, oh, great, we've got Leipzig. I'll get me Swedish. And then go off to the car. You've got to tell him where am I? Yeah, well, so I'm glad to hear there's no particular. Hate.
Well, my son listened to watched the video because he was curious to see what this bloke had to say.
Yeah,
and he said, why didn't you include the Swedes? I said, the battle lasted for about 4 days. The Russians, I think, lost about 22,000 casualties, and the Swedes lost 200.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yeah. Because Dom, Boots on the Table, Dom, he's been on this show before. He's a lovely guy. And it was a very thoughtful and honest.
Yeah, it was. It was really kind of him to do it.
Nice. So if somebody wants to get a hold of a copy of that, then, Steve, where do they go?
Well, probably my blog, Nations in Arms. If you just Google Nations in Arms blog, it'll take you there.
Always. I'll put a link to Steve's blog in the show notes for this, so you can get a hold of a copy if you want. But it's highly recommended. I have to say, I'm even more impressed now that I realise that you've done it on your own. Not that I'm, dissing your skills or anything. I'm thinking it'd be
no, feel free.
I think it'd be a load of rubbish or anything. it looks, and again, in the best way, it looks highly professionally done. It looks really good. Photographs are brilliant. It's well set out. Just flicking to a page, looking at one of the maps, looking at the orders of battle and all the special rules and stuff. I can see that as an easy pickup. Bang on the table, and you're away.
That's the idea.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that, mate. So that's the end of the big game section. A bit longer than normal, but we've talked about the Leipzig book, so that's no issues at all. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a minute when we have our little features section. Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to section 3 of the show, the features section. And the first part of always is the Yorkshire Gamer Quiz. And just a reminder for all the people who are going to send email complaints in that this is not how good a gamer you are, this is how good a Yorkshire gamer you are. Steve, you ready to go? It's just yes or no, or one answer or the other.
Okay.
Regional bias is included, and you're a Yorkshire lad, so you'll be all right, won't you? Question 1, go big or go home.
It's not even a question. Yeah,
Contrast paints, great or a gimmick?
don't know, never used them.
Oh, excellent, excellent. We'll get into that when we come to our chat about painting very soon. But another painting question just coming up, and that's paintbrushes. And would you use Winsor & Newton, posh southern rubbish, or would you use Pro Art made in Skipton?
That's what I use.
Pro Art,
Yeah,
yay!
'cause they're cheaper.
Yes, the cheaper and just as
Yeah,
good.
Just as good, yeah.
Just as good. 96 figures, would you consider that an army or a pipe block?
A medium-sized pipe block.
Medium-sized pipe block, excellent. I like that. We covered this a little bit earlier on, but 6x4 table, big game or small?
6mm figures, it's a big game. It's a small game. It's a small game.
It's a small game. Points-based army or historical order of battle?
Always historical for me.
Oh, brilliant. That's what I like to see. I don't know whether it's me being consciously biased with my guests, but not many people prefer points on this show. I don't know why. Probably because the shit. Oh, sorry, did I say that? So, wet palette or an old bit of MDF for mixing your paint?
I use MDF.
An old bit of MDF, awesome. We'll get onto the wet palette debate later on. Undercutting figures, black or white?
Usually black.
Usually black. Question 9, rattling through these, doing very well so far. Yorkshire tea or dirty mucky coffee?
Yorkshire tea.
Yorkshire tea every time. And question 10, halfway through. Wargames units, if it's historically correct, do you like them tightly packed or socially distant?
Tightly packed.
Tightly packed, yeah. I just can't get this. I can't get this where the figures are miles away from each other in what should be a close order unit.
I like bases to be as small as they can be to protect the figures.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
There's definitely an element of that, isn't there? Yeah. When they are close together, it's so hard for some oik to get a finger between the two and break something.
Yeah, that's right,
yeah. It's going very well. Question 11. 2-hour club game or a weekend monster game?
Weekend
monster game, of course. Question 12. Only controversial in the south of England, this. But avocados, are they just posh mushy peas?
I'm going to let you down here.
I like
avocados, I'm
you
sorry.
Like them?
I do.
Oh,
I do,
no.
Sorry. I like mushy peas as well, but I like avocado.
Oh, dear me.
Sorry.
Dear me. I through this show, episode 40 now, I thought I'd discovered an avocado line somewhere around Northampton. And above Northampton, nobody knew what avocado was, or if they did, they fed it to the dog. And then below it was the greatest food ever.
Yeah.
And Henry Hyde flipped it as well. So
yeah, I lived in Barcelona for 2 years. Mediterranean diet.
Well, I can kind of see where you're coming from there with that. The universal question, Steve, there's a little bit of pressure on you here, but everyone's answered this the same. And that's round dice, spherical dice. Are they allowed or banned on your table? Banned! Yes! 40 episodes. You down the chippy? Are you going to choose haddock or cod?
I don't mind.
You don't mind?
I don't mind. Sorry, no, I don't mind.
Do you like a good table and a set of rules, like a casualty table or something where you're cross-referencing things, or do you like the result of the dice to be what runs the game?
If it's well laid out, a casualty table's great. Yeah.
Cool. We seem to be moving away from that now, don't we? We seem to be... we were talking earlier on, weren't we, about O Group, which to me has a perfectly reasonable and acceptable amount of casualty, what they call modifiers.
Yeah.
It's +1 here and +1 and -1 here. It's not difficult maths.
No.
You're not asking to get the second integration level of a fractional something or other. It's just it's +1 and plus. You can do it on your fingers most of the time.
I think this is where Dave Brown really got it right with the group for me. That the mechanisms are simple, but they're ingenious as well. Yeah. I really like that. That visibility dice?
Yes, the spotting dice.
Yeah. That's a brilliant idea. Simple. Yeah. So simple. Why didn't anybody else think of it? But yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
So you don't need complex rules for it to be ingenious, you know.
Yeah, you can, but then you can go too far.
Yeah.
So my favourite ever set of rules is Napoleonic naval set of rules, and you roll 1d6, and 1 to 5 the British win.
Yeah.
And if you roll 6, you roll again.
It's a draw. Yeah.
Can't get quicker than that.
No.
I think I know the answer to this one, but question 16: 28 mil is king? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Unpainted miniatures allowed on the table? Yes or no? Yeah, I think I know the answer to that one as well. Right, only 3 questions left. Rattle through these quite nicely. I don't think you're a big football fan, are you?
I love football.
You are. You love football. Oh, yes, you did, because you did your kids' team, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
So if you've got to choose now between Bradford City or Leeds United,
Trick question, Liverpool.
Liverpool. I'll give you half a point.
Yeah, sorry. I can't help noticing, Ken, on your wall, you've got a giant banner of Bradford City Liverpool. Is that because they played each other, or you support them both?
Yeah, well, long story. Years ago, when I was a kid, I used to live in Cheshire. I used to go to Anfield on a regular basis and pay £4 to get in and stand there. And then I came to Leeds University in the late 80s, and obviously I couldn't go and watch Liverpool anymore because I couldn't get there. So I started to watch Bradford City, and I've been to watch Bradford ever since.
Right.
And then Stephen Darby, who's a Bradford City player, a former Bradford City player, has got MND, very similar to the lad from Leeds Rhinos.
Yeah, of course.
And not Roddy Doyle, he's the author, isn't he? There was a Scottish rugby player as well, and I do apologise, I can't remember his name at the moment, who's got MND, and he's just passed away, sadly.
Yeah.
So the Bradford played Liverpool at Bradford as a fundraiser for MND.
Oh, okay.
And sadly, Stephen's going downhill quite rapidly at the moment, bless him. So yeah, that was that. So that's the reason why those 2 football clubs.
So Liverpool's an acceptable answer.
Yes.
Half.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I've supported them as a kid, but I've been going to watch Bradford since.
Yeah, I took my lad on the Anfield tour when he was about 8, because he's been a Liverpool supporter all his life, and what a ground! Yeah.
Amazing place. Sadly, there's no cup anymore. So I think the last time I went was the season when the cup, when the seats were put in, and it was I think we played Notts Forest, and we beat them. Liverpool beat them 2-0, and Nigel Clough scored.
Right.
So that will date it.
I was going to say that's dating.
That will date it. So question 19 again. Nice easy one, this one. Yorkshire or the other place over the hill?
Well, it's obviously Yorkshire, but my mother's Lancastrian.
Is she?
Well, she was, yeah. I'm a half-breed, I'm afraid, yeah.
Oh, dear.
I know.
The Muckles or something in the J.K. Rowling. Right. And then the final question is, Games Workshop, are they the work of the devil?
I can't honestly say they are. I've never bought any of their products, but I wouldn't be so cruel. Sorry.
Yeah, mate. No worries at all. So, you've done extremely well. Definitely the upper quartile. 87.5%.
Oh, wow.
With some of the half points that I've given you there.
Yeah.
That sounds very, very reasonable indeed.
You're not showing me the door, so...
No. My mate, Sean Clark, who is an avid 6mm gamer, has got the record low score of about 30%. And he kind of knew which answers he was answering correctly, or for me,
was he winding you up with it? Yeah.
No. He there was just certain ones that he couldn't lie. He had to tell the truth. And ended up with 30%. But I love you, Sean, man. You're the business. The features section isn't just the quiz anymore. Next up is Room 101. Have you managed to think of something for Wargames Room 101?
Yeah, I've got 2.
Oh,
I've got 2.
Oh.
The first one is something that really winds me up about other people.
I love it. I love this.
And the second one is something that really winds me up about me.
Oh, that's good. That's very honest of you.
Yeah, I'll have to see. See what we make it. Well, the first one is table clutter.
Table clutter. Awesome.
Biggest pleasure for me, particularly if we're doing a demo game, is that it looks good.
Yes.
I mean, tablecloths and what have you, the functional drop-on terrain, roads, rivers, the rest of it, perfectly functional,
Yeah.
makes perfect sense. I like terrain boards, sculpted terrain boards. It's cost me a bloody fortune a number of times I've tried to make them, but it's worth all the effort. And then people clutter it up. You put thousands of lovely figures on there. Don't get me wrong, the odd dice, even tape measure, I don't mind. But, quick reference sheets, rules, bacon sandwiches, cups of coffee,
Yes.
somebody's knitting, give them an instant, they'll take a mile,
Yeah.
So,
I don't think I can disagree. I can. It doesn't take me long if I close my eyes to picture a table that I've seen at a show that there must have been sometimes years spent getting it right, and it's covered in fast play sheets, people's bags of stuff that they've bought from the show, coffee. If I've got all that money I've spent on that terrain, nobody's putting a coffee cup on it.
No.
It doesn't matter how confident you aren't going to spill it. Some idiot's going to come back past and knock it over at some stage. Yeah, it's a big. And do you find when you're running games that it's hard to keep some people are buggers for putting stuff on the table, and you have to keep an eye on them all the time.
Yeah, and keep telling them, and no matter how many times you tell them, it doesn't seem to make any difference.
You're at a show and you wander and get a coffee or a bacon butty or something. You come back to the table and they've put everything back out again.
Yeah, I'm not that precious about my figures because I mean, like you, I paint my own figures. I got to put a fair bit of time into it. But if somebody drops something, I mean, it happens. The toys to be played with, and I never worry about it.
Yeah.
That's an accident. If you're putting a lot of shit on the table when we're trying to put on a demo game, that's not an accident. That's being careless.
Oh,
so, that does worry me.
Yeah, that is definitely going into the War Games vault, mate. That is an awesome one. And just something that came to mind then when you were talking about terrain boards. The thing that I do like terrain boards, do like sculpted terrain boards, but the thing that always gets me is the lines between the boards.
Yeah.
Have you ever found a way of minimising that? Because sometimes you look at it and you think, oh, it's brilliant, and then your mind starts, oh, it looks like a chessboard or something like that
I'm on my, and this sort of links in with my second 101 candidate. I'm on my, 28th iteration of terrain board, something like that. And you learn a bit every time as when you don't quite get it right. Yeah, I found one way you can sort of kid yourself optically is rather than using 2-foot squares, which is my sort of standard size, you mix in 3x2 and 2x1s, and it folds the eye a little bit.
Yeah, I like that.
It's a bit harder work coordinating where the roads and what have you leave and join, because obviously they've all got to meet up.
Yeah.
But it does sort of trick your eye a little bit.
That's good one, that. I like that.
So that's...
Yeah, because your mind will see patterns better than it sees non-patterns.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. And the advantage as well with the bigger boards, the 3x2s, is that if you, particularly for hills, you can get a decent sized hill on that 3x2. Whereas with the 2x2, you have to join two together, which is technically more difficult to do because the join has got to be really good and the contours have got to match. Yeah. So it helps that. And the 2x1s as well are great for specials like maybe railways or streams that you're not going to use all the time. And they're easy to store. So
that's a good bit of advice there. I like that. So you've got a personal one about yourself. Yeah. What's that? This is interesting.
Well, how can you describe it? Perfectionitis.
Right.
Yeah, perfectionitis.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of a problem, if I'm honest. It's a bit of a well. I mean, I'm a bit of a standing joke with the lads I wargame with, because what'll happen is I'll paint something, like a unit or maybe make a piece of terrain, and then a couple of years later somebody will bring out a range of figures just a lot nicer, or they might be in a different pose that I think, and I can feel my hands start to sort of twitch, and I think, I could do a much better job with those. And I used to start off by saying to the guys, I was thinking of doing this, and said, well, why? What you've got's perfectly nice. Well, I know it is, but if I do it this way, it'll be better. Yeah, but what you've got's perfectly nice. And after a while, I just stopped saying anything because they just laugh at me, you know.
Yeah.
So I thought I just suffer in silence. There might be I'm doing it at the minute. I can't help myself.
Yeah.
I'm building up an American War of Independence collection at the minute, and I did some. I like marching figures,
Yes,
because they fit most situations. I'm using mainly Perry figures, and I've got my American militia in marching poses. I'm going to use scruffy them up quite a bit, but and they look nice. They look okay. But then when they brought out later, as they do, these firing line figures, and I thought, and they got figures running away and all the rest of it, and I thought, oh, that'd be much better. So I've just sold like 3 regiments worth of militia, which means when I had a decent sized American army, I've now got a small American army.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to have to go out and replace the figures, and and I'm an absolute bugger for doing this. The number of collections I've sold over the years, because a new range has come out, and I thought, I'm not quite happy with these. The terrain boards I'm working at the moment, 23rd iteration might be a slight exaggeration, but it's probably the 7th or 8th.
Yeah,
I blame Colin Rumford for this. When the Rapid Fire books came out and the supplements they did. I mean, the figures and the vehicles were lovely, but Colin, in particular, Colin's terrain was just out of this world. And I looked at mine, and I thought, oh, God, this is that. So I redid it. Yeah. And it was definitely better, but it wasn't quite there. Yeah. But every time I do it, I get a bit better. But the problem is, I'm bloody 62 now. I mean, how much longer have I got? How many more times can I do this? I've got to get to a point where it's good enough. Leave it alone.
Some stage, you're gonna. I appreciate that.
So what this is, it's a 101 candidate. It's a cry for help. To be honest.
Therapy is free. Is free on the show.
It's like in the psychiatrist's chair, isn't it? Now,
I think we all as wargamers have a certain level of obsession.
Yeah.
And I tend not to sell stuff.
No.
But I tend to keep collecting. And keep collecting, so that's probably my vice.
I think it's linked maybe with what I do for a living, because when you paint figures for a living, if somebody comes along and offers you a large amount of money for a big collection, it's difficult to turn it down.
Yeah.
Because when you're self-employed, you never I've been lucky. I've had work for the last however many years, but you never know. And when you particularly got a young family, you think, well, I could bank this money, and So I think that's part of it. I think that's part of it.
Excellent. Well, that therapy session was free, Steve.
Was that free?
The next one will be £25 an hour. But that's good. A couple of excellent ones there, especially like the table clutter one. Yeah. You see, I've said this a few times on the podcast, but when I started Wargames Room 101, I thought it would last 6 or 7 episodes.
Yeah.
And we'd get to a stage where everyone would go, well, I can't think of anything. But then, without fail, every week, my guests come up with something, and straight away I go, yes! Oh, dear. Awesome. And then the final bit of the features section is the Desert Island Wargame. I'm sure you'll be familiar with Desert Island discs.
Yeah.
So it's just similar to that. So what would your Castaway game be? What would be, figures, table size? Nothing is an issue.
What you mean? All the components of any war game that I would want to do, I can take it with me.
Anything. Yeah.
Terrain, figures, rules, the whole lot. Oof, God, that is a tough one. There are so many. I mean, I like a lot of the scenarios I do are sort of made up, but I do like fighting historical battles. I must admit. We did one at Triples. God, it must be 25 years ago. Gettysburg, and we did the second day.
Yeah,
and it's just a really interesting battle.
Yeah.
So I think if I could have sort of Peter Gill sculpted Gettysburg terrain from what was that TV program?
Battleground. Yes, Battleground.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. So would that be 28 mil?
Yeah.
Got to be. What sort of size table would it be? What sort of table do you have at Triples?
I've got bugger what else to do on it.
Exactly. Who cares? Big as you can get.
Yeah.
Big as you can get. Awesome. I like that one. Other than obviously a religious book, which you can take for free, what would be the one book that you would take with you?
Military war game.
Whatever you would want to take.
Speaking of Desert Island Discs, I remember was it Jack Straw when he was on Desert Island Discs? his takeaway book was Michael Howard's Franco Prussian War.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
which knocked me sideways. I must admit.
I'd never have guessed that.
No, neither would I. No, I think it was Jack Straw.
I would have thought they wouldn't speak to each other. You couldn't get opposite ends of the spectrum, really, could you?
But yeah, it's a book that's influenced me, I think, more than any other. It's what set me off on the Franco Prussian tracks. It'd have to be that one.
Yeah. And then finally, outside of your Desert Island game, you get to take one wargames unit that means specifically something to you. So it could be one that you've done, or one from a magazine, or from history. What would that be?
Well, just harking back to the Perfectionitis strand.
Yeah.
I started to do an Italian Wars collection years ago.
Right, yeah.
Never completed, I'm sorry to say. But one thing you've got to have is a unit of Landsknechts.
Yeah.
And I'd put off painting them because, well, you can guess why. Yeah, they are a pain in the ass. But I painted 72 of them up into a unit. And I looked at them and I thought, I thought, they're okay. And I thought, I wonder if another highlight would make a difference.
Yeah.
So I put another highlight on them and it did make a difference.
Yeah.
I thought, I wonder if a final one would. So I did that as well. And we're talking 72 figures, so 8-10 hours extra work. 8 or 10 hours extra work. Though I say so myself, it's the best unit I've ever painted in my life.
Yeah.
And it was worth that extra effort. So I think I'd probably have them because it would show, Perfectionitis, not a good idea on the whole. Yeah. Sometimes it pays off.
Sometimes it pays off. Yeah. And did you keep those? Or?
Oh. As soon as I told the story, I thought, shit, he's going to ask me if I kept him or not. No, I didn't. I got a good price for them, but I sold them. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh,
no, I know.
If you've got that unit, bring them back to Steve. he's looking a bit depressed now. We've had the over perfection discussion, and we've talked about this unit, and I think it would only be fair to hand them back to Steve as a thing. Well, lovely. Thank you very much for that. That's the end of that features section, and we'll be back in a moment, ladies and gentlemen, for our big topic. We're still here upstairs in the room, and we're cracking away, and we're on to the big topic. And I'm going to cover a couple of things with Steve today, and I'm going to continue on from the theme that we touched on in the big game section, and that is the authoring, the writering, or whatever it is in proper English like there. I remember, and I've got a nice little pile of stuff that Steve's done next to me that we're going to talk. But what I'm going to talk about first isn't here. Steve isn't here.
What's that?
So, I remember not that long ago actually going through some old wargames magazines and coming across the name Steve Shann in a couple of articles in some of the magazines. Was that you?
Oh, it could have been, yeah. I had a big clear out a while back, and all the magazines
Steve
went.
Sean.
No, it's not. No,
it's not Steve
it's
Sean.
my alter ego. No, I'm the real one.
So, really, the question then is how did you get into the writing for wargame stuff?
It started off with the Franco Prussian stuff, I think. Like I was saying before about stumbling across those books. It was just a complete revelation and a revolution, really, for me, because I'd gone from having a few English books that were, that gave you a broad outline, to having after-action reports down to battery level. So like the raw material was suddenly there. And it just hadn't been exploited in English before. Yeah. And I thought, this is a chance to do something original. And I'm really interested in the period anyway. And I just started going through all this stuff. As I say, I was sort of gainfully unemployed at the time, and I had plenty of time to look at it. Leeds University were fantastic. Now it's like getting to Fort Knox, but you could just walk in. Walk in off the street, which is what I did. And they even let me join and borrow books.
Wow, fantastic.
Which was amazing. And that just enabled me to be able to sort of study it in some detail while I had some time on my hands.
And I bet some of those books nobody's looked at them since, probably.
They haven't. No, for sure. They've been on the shelves for decades, probably. Wow. And I mean, when they let me borrow one, I used to ring up and renew it over the phone. And I think I had one for like a couple of years. And
awesome.
They never asked for any of them back. So.
Did you remember the first article you did?
For a magazine? No, to be honest. No. No, I can't. No.
Did you get paid for it? That was amazing.
Oh, no, I tell a lie. I can't remember which battle it was, but it was Yeah, I was living in Barcelona at the time.
Yeah.
That's right. When Wargames Illustrated came out, it was a week before I went. I've just happened to be in Smith's, and there was issue number 1.
Wow.
So I took it with me. So I was reading up the beach and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And after a while, I thought it'd be nice to write something for this. And while I was there, I mean, I didn't speak Spanish when I went, but I picked it up when I got there. And there was this series of books on the Independence War, as they call it, and I picked those up. There was, again, loads of information. So I thought, I'll write an article on this, and Duncan accepted it and published it. But I can't remember what it's called. It was nearly 40 years ago now.
I accept that as an excuse.
Yeah.
Don't worry. But I do remember seeing your name in some of those early Wargames magazines.
Yeah, I did run on loan to Arabia. I seem to remember that in was it War Games World?
Yeah.
Because that's what I was reading, 7 Pillars of Wisdom at the time. And I just thought it'd make it interesting. It's often like that. I just think that sounds interesting. And
well, it was kind of a bit weird for me because it was like, oh, I know him, rather than these names that in later life I've come to know and speak to them.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, it's Steve from Club. What's he going on about? Did you enjoy writing as a child? Did you English literature and that sort of stuff as well?
It was one of the things I didn't come bottom of the class at when I was at school.
You were all right with it.
Yeah,
you were all right with it. Oh, well, that's good. That's good to see. Did you do a book on magenta?
No.
I seem to remember the movie.
Yeah, magenta does come into it. No, one of the things I did when I came back was I started buying and selling books.
Yeah.
And I called it Magenta Books.
There we go.
Nobody ever understood why. They thought, I got a fixation with the colour or something. But no, I couldn't think of a name.
Yeah.
And I was interested in the Second Empire. I couldn't call it the book, Solferino book, Gravelot San Priva book. So I called it Magenta Books. That's
where it's come from.
That's where it's come from. Yeah.
And just for the uninitiated out there, Magenta was a big battle.
1859, sorry, for the French and the Austrians in Italy, that's right. Yeah.
It's not just a colour.
Having said that, Doctor, it's coming back to me now. I think you might be right. I think I did do an article about Magenta for one of the magazines.
Don't worry.
Sorry.
Have you ever published any rules? Is that something you're not got into?
No, not really. I did a short set of Franco Prussian rules many years ago, and I mean I sold quite a few, but I think having done it once, that was enough.
Was it.
I really admire people that do it. It's difficult.
I think it's harder now as well because the author's more accessible, aren't they?
Yeah.
Because I would imagine that when you did those Franco Prussian rules, if somebody needed to get hold of you, they'd have to write to you.
That's right. Pen and paper. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Whereas now, if you put something on the internet.
Yeah, you're putting yourself out there, aren't you? Really?
Yeah. I know that feeling with a number.
I can imagine.
Yeah, this podcast does generate some correspondence. A number of the words in them tend to have 4 letters.
Yeah.
Don't know why. I don't know how anyone gets upset. What always amazes me, and I think I might have said this in the last episode, is that people will get upset with stuff that's about an hour and a half into the episode.
Yeah.
So I can't believe that people are randomly fast forwarding and then getting offended by a bit.
No.
They must have listened for an hour and a half and then gone, oh, don't like this bloke. He said to me.
Yeah.
So anyway, there we go. That's my tiny little bit interest. We've talked about your research techniques back there, and then we've got a few books in front of us here, and I'm just going to pick the first 3 up first. And these are proper old school publishing, really as I would call them. So they're A5 in size, and from a company called Anschluss.
That's right. Great Battles of History Refought.
Yeah. And I've got some of these for the Peninsular War.
Yeah,
they're very, very good books.
Yes, yeah.
So this is FPW01.
Yeah.
And we've got Weissenberg. I'll let you do that one.
Yeah, Froschwiller.
Awesome. And these are obviously battles in the Franco Prussian War.
That's right, yeah.
So just explain what was behind these and what's in them?
Well, like you, I'd got quite a few of them, but I was interested in the 1813 campaign, so I had quite a few of those. In fact, I think the guy that ran the company wrote those himself.
Yeah.
And I thought they were a great idea. They're really handy, compact. They were cheap. Give you all the information you need to fight the battle, good orders of battle. And I just thought, I'd been doing some reading and research for quite a while at this point. And I just wrote to him and said, I've got this idea. And he said, yeah, great, go for it. And old school, I typed that myself.
Wow.
And on one of those electronic typewriters, you type in a whole line and then it prints it for you and then you do the next line.
Oh, fantastic.
And then I just literally sent the pages off to him and he just copied them.
Yeah, because it used to store a line, didn't it? And you could see the line.
See the line, that's
and
right.
you could edit the line
Yeah.
and then you kind of open the line.
Yeah.
And it worked. And the maps, are they hand-drawn?
Just hand-drawn. I did those myself, yeah.
Absolutely fantastic.
Very crude, but they did the job, and it was 1987. That it's
yeah, but I think I would say that the difference between this and the book that you've just recently done on Leipzig, is pretty pictures and better layout.
Yeah,
because all the information's in there, isn't it? To put a game on.
That's the thing.
And just flicking through the one that I can't pronounce, and I should have picked the other one, shouldn't I? It's got lists of battalions and squadrons and guns and wargaming orders of battle and maps and descriptions, all the things that you've got in that other book.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And I think it's a tried and tested format, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it works for everyone.
If you can provide the information, because that is the main thing, that the content's got to be there. But if you can make it look nice, great. Why not?
And I take it these are out of print now.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, I haven't. I see the odd Anschluss publishing on a couple of second-hand bookstores.
Yeah. They come up on eBay every now and then, I think. Yeah.
If we take it down to Antiques Roadshow, we're not going to get a fortune.
I wouldn't have thought so.
We're not going to get a fortune. If you sign it, maybe. Would that,
I never write on books.
Would that half the price? Rather
probably. Yeah.
You've got those two really, really nice books on fighting the battle, and I seem to remember a period, probably mid-90s, where Franco Prussian seemed to be quite popular in 15mm.
Yeah, there was a bit of surge in it. I do. Yeah.
And I think do you think it'll come back when the Perrys finally get the finger out and do the French infantry that I need for my battle, Mr. Perry? Sorry. Do you think it'll become?
It certainly won't harm it, will it?
Yeah,
it certainly won't harm it. I mean, it's not the ideal scale, to be fair, for Franco Prussian War.
No, because it's not an area of expertise for me at all. But the big battles, aren't they?
The big battles with long ranges, and I think that's the problem. That if you've got even a big table like yours, 6 foot deep, but the artillery could just fire.
Yeah,
a mile and a half, 2 miles if they wanted to. And
it's not too good, is it?
Yeah, with 10mm figures, it works great. I think.
Yeah.
But,
Well, Penn and Draken do a really nice range, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
Very nice range, which is nice to see. I mean, the thing that with the Risorgimento stuff that I've done, it's relatively small battles.
Yes.
Terrain plays fairly large part in it because it's quite hilly. So, although the Battle of Mentana that I'm going to do, it's the first use of the Shazpo that we talked about before we started recording. But it doesn't really have a massive effect on the battle because you can't see that far to use your massive range.
No, exactly.
So, some peasant with a red shirt on with a smoothbore musket can hit you. Doesn't matter what you've got.
Can't do it 6 times in a minute, though.
No, you can't.
No.
You can't. Oh, there's a letter in that one.
Oh, I think that I think that was somebody asking me a question. I think I just tucked it away in there. Yeah.
Well, this is from 2nd December 1987. God. Someone's written to Steve
an actual letter.
I'd forgotten
I'd got that. Yeah.
And he's not answered it. He's just left it there. So whoever that is, we're going to apologise. And then the third book in this little series is a Franco Prussian War guide, which for somebody like me would be absolutely ideal because I really don't know anything about the period. And is there something like this out now that people can get? It's, as we're saying, it's kind of one of those wars that because we haven't got too much, and by we I mean British, not Yorkshire, British involvement, that it tends to come and go as a period of interest for gaming.
Yeah, it seems to have those little spurts every now and then where, and as you said, maybe with the Perrys bringing out their figures, it might give it a push. But I don't see it ever being mainstream, to be honest.
No. And I've heard Rich Clark from Two Fat Lardies talk about it, and he's really into the period.
I think that's the thing. People that are that they're willing to sort of shell out on books and go into it. But
I think he said that financially or business wise, for him to spend the time playtesting and getting a set of rules and getting it produced, it'd just be financial suicide because
it's right.
Three people would buy it and two of them are in this room.
I reconciled myself to that fact a long time ago. Yeah. For me, it's a personal sort of interest. It's a personal passion. It's something I've always been interested in. And
you do think that sometime that people would get bored of Waterloo and Napoleonics and search for something else, and they just never do. I was the first battle I was really fascinated in was Waterloo, and I had a book with the order of battle in the back, and I put a line under each unit as I painted it. And still people are fascinated with it now, years and years and years later.
For me, it's one of the most boring battles to fight that there is. There's no, for me, well, it's just an opinion, but there's no tactical interest in it, really. It's just a frontal slog against a difficult position to attack, and compared to some other battles.
Yeah, I think it was Wellington that said they came on in the same old way, and we saw them off in the same old way. So, I think Napoleon had clearly reached his peak as a commander and started to go fairly rapidly down.
Borodino's another one. It's he didn't show a lot of imagination in that one, and it was again. I think it's a fairly uninteresting battle to fight. I mean, more so than Waterloo, but there are lots more that are more gameable. I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, and a lot more interesting.
Yeah, and like Wagram or something like that.
And a lot more opportunity to not necessarily repeat history.
That's right. You get a bit more chance to manoeuvre. You've got a few options, but at Borodino, what can you do? I mean, the Grand Redat's there. You've got to take it.
You can't just ignore it.
No, can't ask them to leave nicely, can you? You've got to.
Excuse me, lads. Do you mind just fucking off? So the Franco Prussian stuff, you've done a lot on that, and you've come back to it over the years, and we're now going into the pile of books I'm working down. We're going down, and we've got colour. We've got pictures and everything, and these we've got two Osprey books here on the French army from the Franco Prussian War, and you've done them with a guy called Louis
Del Perrier,
that could have been anything if I said it. And then the second one with Richard and Christina Cook. So, what was your involvement in these then?
Well, I suggested the titles to Osprey, and I wrote them. But Louis is, he's definitely the foremost expert on the uniforms of the period, and the editor at Osprey put me in touch with him. So I went over to Paris and met him, and took him out for lunch and we had a chat, and he said, I'm definitely interested in helping out with this.
Brilliant. And these are the standard Osprey format. So we've got Men-at-Arms Series 233 and Men-at-Arms Series 237, and it's the colour plates in the middle with the descriptions and photographs and stuff, and then the plates at the back with the description of the plates, what's actually on the plates there. If you have a look in that white box there in the final one, you should see some Chasseurs Pied in campaign dress. I'm just getting a seal of approval here from Steve, from the expert.
Very nice. Yeah, they're the Perry things.
They're the Perry metal ones,
Oh, yeah.
Because none of us are waiting for the plastic ones to come out, are we?
Let it go, okay.
I even emailed them. I think...
I bet that got you somewhere, didn't it?
Yeah, no, actually, they did reply.
Right,
I think Alan replied and said, stop being a knobhead. No, he replied very nicely and said... It's actually with Rendira, I think it is the people who do them.
Yeah.
So it's in a huge pile of stuff waiting to be.
They are well up to Perry standards, aren't they?
They're gorgeous. They're really, really nice.
They are.
Maybe you can explain why are they classed as light infantry with all that stuff on the back?
I was just about to say, why have they got their packs on? Because they certainly dumped them before the battle started.
It's an and they've got there's like a ginormous lump on the back that allows you to glue the pack on.
Right.
So it's not like you can just not have the pack. the pack's going on,
Oh,
or all of them are Quasimodo, basically. That's the only way you can.
Oh, right.
That's the only way you can do it.
Okay.
But there we go. And then the second book, you've got another couple of people involved.
They're the artists.
They're the artists who are involved. Oh yes, Garibaldi turned up with the French, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
And then the Papal. Oh, there they are, the Papal Zouaves. Yep. I've got a couple of massive units of them for Mentana.
I bet, yeah.
And of course, they the ones that a few French people and other nations went there to fight for the French in the Franco Prussian War after they'd finished doing the Garibaldi bit. So yeah, that's fantastic. And then more or less up to date. This is quite a new one, isn't it? This one.
Well, the Ospreys are over 30 years ago.
Over 30 years ago. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been a bit lazy since then.
Yeah, had a bit of time off.
Yeah.
Had a bit of time off. I had 6 weeks off after 5 podcasts, and you had 30 years off after 2 podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. It's not very good, is it?
It's not too good, no. It's a bit shabby, that stuff.
Yeah, it is.
So I'm looking now at Uniforms of the Franco-Prussian War, French Army 1870, Steve Shann and Robert Marion. So what's your involvement with this one?
Well, this one's a bit of a story, actually, because I got an email out of the blue from Dave Ryan, at Caliber Books. Usual terse email from Dave. He tends to put most of the message in the heading.
Yes.
He just said, "Are you busy?" ? I thought a stupid question, but
yeah,
it turns out that Bob Marion, who everybody knows his artwork. I mean, it's appeared in God knows how many books and magazine articles over the years. But he did a book on the Prussian Army of 1870, 12, 13 years ago, and Dave published that, and he'd been working on a companion volume on the French Army, but he died, of course. And he said, but the book's done. He said, but there's like a load of black and white illustrations to go in, and we need somebody to do the captions. Can you do it? I said, yeah, sure, no problem. It's a few evenings' work. It's no big deal. Next day, there's a knock on the door. Somebody had this big parcel to me. I thought, what's this?
Yeah.
I opened it up, and it got all these notes in there. Most of it sort of typed up, hundreds of pages of sort of uniform bits and bobs. But it also had all 41, I think it's 41, original colour plates that he'd done. And I thought, Christ, these must be worth a fortune. He's suddenly dropped them on me via the postman. So I looked through it all, and I soon realised that it wasn't finished. It was nowhere bloody near finished. So I messaged Dave. I said, look, I'm sorry, mate, but I can do the captions for you, no problem. But the book's just it's not ready. You couldn't publish it.
Yeah.
He says, well, all right. So I just assumed it was. I said, no, I'm afraid not. He said, well, could you finish it off? I said, well, to be honest, mate, no, I don't think I could, because there's a lot of it that's just either it's wrong, or it looks like. Well, I think what he'd done is he collected bits and bobs of information over the years and sort of assembled it all together.
Yeah,
and it was completely unbalanced. So, like, excuse me, he might have. I think he spent like a couple of paragraphs describing the helmet of the colonel of the Emperor's bodyguard, which they didn't wear on campaign.
Yeah.
And he described the uniform of another regiment that had been disbanded the year before.
Yeah.
And it was stuff like that. So I said, it just needs a complete rewrite. He says, oh, great, you'll do it then. I thought, well, that wasn't quite what I said. And it wasn't quite what I meant either. But I thought, well, at the end of the day, I mean, his work, the plates are just gorgeous.
Yeah, they're lovely.
They are absolutely gorgeous. And I thought, well, he's done the first volume. It'd be nice to finish it. So I said, well, look, what I could do is just completely rewrite it, but put all the details into the uniforms that they actually wore, not the parade ground stuff and all the rest of it. And he said, yeah, great. So do that. But I thought, what we were talking about before, I thought, the amount of work involved, I thought there's no way on God's earth that this is going to. Yeah. I mean, I don't expect it to pay, but it's, you would want something, because I knew there was a lot of work in. So basically what I said to him was, well, look, if I can have 16 of the plates, I'll do it.
Yeah, that's a reasonable thing.
So he said, yeah, fine. Because to be honest, if I didn't do it, nobody else was going to do it. So that was the deal. I've got 16 of those original plates at home, which is my sort of fee for doing it, which I was delighted to have them. And it's done, and it's on the shelf with his German volume, so it completed it.
It's a lovely book, and some of these, like you say, these illustrations are really, really nice. Very, very nice. Yeah. And that's out 2021, so it's
pretty
new.
recent, yeah.
Pretty new.
He really had a feel for the period, the elegance of the uniforms. He really brought it out well, I think.
Yeah, and there's certainly looking at them, there's certainly an element of a lived-in look, I think is the best way to describe it, rather than, sometimes you'll see illustrations in some books that are so prim and proper that, they probably looked like that for 30 minutes after they came out of their tailors, and that was it. But these guys have got a little bit of mud on the boots. And
that's right.
It brings it to life, doesn't it?
Yeah, and he's done where possible in campaign uniform, and he's scruffed them up a little bit. And,
really, really nice. So that just leaves me with one book in the pile. To have a look at, and this is the Battle of Seelow Heights, 16th to the 19th of April 1945. Wargamers Guide. It's that Steve Shann bloke again who's done it. Unfortunately, he can't be here today. This is very similar in format to the Leipzig book. Yeah. And flicking over the first page, self-published again.
Yeah, it was the first one I did.
The first one you did. We talked about it very briefly earlier on. For me, it's a very interesting choice because I can't remember what film it was, but I remember watching quite an extended battle scene about the Seelow Heights in a film once. Right. That was just literally Germans cowering in dugouts and then Russian tanks driving over the top of it. So what drew you to do this as a...
Yeah, it doesn't sound very promising on the face.
No,
it doesn't.
No. If we're sat here and you've organised a game and we go, right, what we're doing today, Steve? We're doing Seelow Heights. Oh, great! Am I the Russians? No, you Germans can.
I'm not playing them. Yeah.
Right, I've got the chippy. So why did you choose it?
Well, it's a bit of a challenge from a scenario designer's point of view, but I put it on as a demo game back in, I think it was 2013 at Partisan, and that's how it turned out. The Russian players, as wargamers will do, they attacked very scientifically and gradually wore the Germans down, and they won relatively comfortably. And that was a nice sort of lesson in what I maybe need to think about. Because the thing about this operation was that the Russians were terrified that the Americans were going to beat them to Berlin. Because the Americans stopped on the Elbe River, and the understanding was that the Russians would take Berlin. But Stalin, being Stalin, thought they were lying. He didn't believe them.
A little bit of paranoia.
It's just a little bit, yeah. And you can understand it after what had gone on for 4 years in the East. They wanted to take Berlin. So he really put the pressure on Zhukov, particularly, who was commanding the main strike, to get the job done before the Americans got there. Not only that, Zhukov, there was another Soviet commander called Konev, who was a big rival of Zhukov's. And Stalin was playing them both off against each other. And Zhukov's tactics were just brutal. I mean, the casualties that they suffered were just horrendous. But it didn't matter because they'd got so much of everything. Yeah. As long as he got to Berlin first. I mean, there was one story I heard that Konev's men, they'd attacked further south and they'd managed to get across this river and they'd turned north and were heading to Berlin and it looked like they were going to get there first. And Zhukov brought up one of his artillery divisions, these mass guns, and started bombarding the head of the Soviet columns just to slow them down. And, this is what you're dealing with. Yeah. So I thought, well, maybe this is how I can make it work. It's because the Germans can't win. I mean, there's no chance that they were going to stop the Russians from getting it. But they didn't know that. They thought if we can hold on for a few days, the Americans will get here. Because they assumed that the Americans would just carry on coming. They didn't know about this agreement to stop. So what I've done is the victory conditions are quite tight for the Soviets. So they can't bugger about. They've got to get a move on. So the tactics, you can use tactics, but you can't be too subtle because you're on the clock, you know. So that's how I've sort of balanced it out.
I mean, that's really interesting because I've played a lot of games, early desert war games, where the Italians have got absolutely no chance whatsoever. But it's a book by Robert Avery that covers Operation Compass. Yeah. and that does a similar thing, and it makes the objectives for the British player sometimes nearly impossible to get a convincing win.
Yeah,
you're trying to play for a winning draw, if you like.
Yeah, exactly.
And even then, you're tight on time. You can't muck about doing stuff.
Well, I put there's 2 or 3 pages in there because I'm not, as I say, we used rapid fire rules a lot, so I sort of the orders of battle sort of premised on. But I put in a few extra pages of special rules to sort of try and give it a bit of extra flavour. And one of them, it allows the Soviet infantry to move more quickly. But when they do that, they can't fire themselves and they're more vulnerable to incoming fire. They're not being very tactical. So it allows you to speed up, but the price is likely to be higher casualties, and it's getting that balance right. So, yeah, on the one hand, the Germans have got no chance, but they can still win the scenarios into the game, you know.
You mentioned rapid fire as the set of rules it was based on, but is it compatible with most other sets?
Oh, yeah. I mean, people have used them with sort of Blitzkrieg Commander and various other rules. They're not...
Yeah, because I'm just looking at one of the All Bats now, and you're breaking it down into sections and numbers of vehicles and number of guns and stuff like that. So
yeah, I mean,
really, it should transfer across to anything.
Yeah, I mean, you'd struggle to do it at platoon level, I think, but for sort of battalion, regimental level rules, it would work pretty well.
So the pictures in this I read at the front are from your collection.
Yeah, they were all from mine. Yeah,
and are these 20 mil?
They're 20 mil. Yeah.
Oh, the days of 20 mil World War II. Yes. Those are the days. Those are the days. Interestingly, just slightly on the side from this, there's a new set of Rapid Fire out, isn't there? Have you played those?
Rapid Fire Reloaded. I've got them and I've read them. Yeah. And initially, I like the look of them. I do like the look of them. But the lads that play them at Chris Flower's house, initially, Chris said, "Oh no,
yeah, well, it's a big change, isn't it?
Yeah, no, he wasn't having it at all." And I said, "No, I don't know. I think maybe." I said, "To be fair, I haven't played them, but they look a lot more intuitive, a bit." I mean, the rules, God knows the rules aren't complicated to start with, but it just sort of smooths out, makes them even quicker. And I was all in favour. Apparently now they love them.
Oh,
so they have converted, but yeah.
Brilliant. I'd certainly like to have Colin on the show at some stage. I've just not had a chance to have a chat with him to get him on, because I think, although it's not something I played, I'm certainly aware that Rapid Fire was a big influence on a lot of World War II gamers over many years, to see another version of it come out is very, very good to see. So yeah, that's fantastic, and that was the first book.
It was, yeah.
That was the first. So what have you got? What have you got in loaded and ready to go in terms of books? Are you going to do any more?
Yeah, I am. Like I say, it's 30 years since I did the Ospreys.
Yeah.
So it's been a bit of a. Yeah, it's been a long period.
Another 30 years, you might struggle to get something out.
Well, yeah, but it's been sort of, maturing in my brain. And I started a couple of things ages ago, 15 years ago, and they're nearly done now.
Oh, brilliant.
I have this idea, because I thought about doing a history of the whole war, and I thought, oh, God, to do it justice, you'd have to do half a dozen volumes.
Yeah.
I couldn't face doing it. So I thought I'll pick on aspects that interest me, but try and do it in real detail, So, it's probably going to be called Studies from the Franco Prussian War, and then they'll be numbered, and then whatever the title is, like the first one's on the mitrailleurs. So it's really sort of super specific. I've been looking at myself 50 copies, I would imagine, but I don't particularly care. But I'm doing it because it interests me.
And is that going to be purely historical, or is it going to have a wargaming slant as well? It's going to be
purely historical. Yeah.
And are you thinking about doing any more of these wargamers guides?
I'd like to. I mean, I enjoy doing them, but they are time consuming. I've got to say, it's a lot. It is a lot of work. Even when it's finished, just organising the layout and the photographs and everything, and bringing it all together. Checking everything, because you've got to do it all yourself. That's the even the proofreading, you've got to do it all yourself, and it's a lot of work. But yes, I would like to do some more.
But having kind of cracked the seal, if you like, of doing it yourself, has that now given you more confidence to do it? And that was the chair, by the way. Does it give you more confidence to do stuff? You're not trying to present it to a publisher. It's like, I've done it. I know what I'm doing.
I've had enough unhappy experiences with publishers to want to work for them. I'd rather do it myself. Yeah. If there are any fuck-ups, it's down to me.
Yeah.
Well,
as I said earlier when we were talking about the Leipzig book, I think it's brilliant that you've been able to do this to this standard. And I'm sure people who've got these.
I couldn't have done it on my own.
I appreciate that, but if you'd have shown this to your 25-year-old self, you would never have believed that you've done that.
No.
It's an absolute top quality stuff, and I'm not just saying that because you're on the show. You know what I'm like. If it's shy, if it's shy, I'll tell you.
I'd expect nothing less.
Yeah, and again, if people want to get a copy of that through your nation,
same thing. Yeah,
fantastic. And my chair is making lots of funny noises. I do apologise. So we've kind of covered the author thing very, very well, and we've had a chat about your books and your future plans. So we're going to move on to another part of your life now. It's quite a big part of your life, and that's painting figures. And I've never had anyone on the show before who has done that for a living. It's something I did for a number of years, a long time ago now. But it's going to be interesting for me, and I'm sure for the audience to listen and chat about a number of things around it. But I suppose the first and obvious question is, how did you get from the point of being a hobby painter to people paying you to paint for them?
Like most of the things that have happened in my life, just sheer dumb luck. Really. I wish I could say it was all planned stage by stage, but I'd be lying.
So if you're going to do a book on business practice,
don't ask me.
It's going to be like one page, sheer luck.
Yeah, just go with the flow. I'd come back. I'd come back from Spain. I didn't have any money. I was living in Leeds at the town Armley at the time, and I think I might have put an advert in one of the magazines, not just flying a kite, really.
Yeah,
and somebody sort of, commissioned me to do some stuff, and I did a few, and it sort of helped keep the wolf from the door for a few months. But then the gentleman we had on your show, Chris Flowers,
good old Chris,
he joined the club just a few months after I did, and he just didn't have the time to do it himself, and I just ended up painting for him, and I've been painting for him for 35 years. I think, I think you might have mentioned on your podcast he probably paid my mortgage amount twice, and he's not exaggerating. I don't think.
Yeah,
and from that, obviously, more customers came along. I've just been fortunate that I've managed to stay reasonably busy.
And looking back on you starting to paint, and as you've gone through your painting career, if you can call it that, who were the people that you first looked at as painters and thought, bloody hell? And who were the painters that you've admired over the years?
Well, I suppose when I was starting out, Wargames Illustrated was still fairly young, so a lot of it was sort of Gilda's stuff and his circle of fame. People like Tony Runke, fantastic painter.
Brilliant. Absolutely
brilliant. Ian Smith was a fantastic painter as well. And you look at that stuff and you think, wow.
Different level, isn't it?
Very much so.
Especially at that time.
Yeah, I mean, even now they stand out, I think. But
and is there any painters as years have gone by that you've kind of gone, I like that?
Yeah, I'm
people like Mark Allen and
well, Mark's actually he's just doing a lot of flags for me.
Does he? Bless him.
yeah. I mean, his flags are absolutely gorgeous. I couldn't afford to get him to paint figures for me, but I could afford the odd flag. But I mean, he's. In fact, I do have a few figures that he did paint for me that I picked up elsewhere. But he's a great painter. I mean, like James Roach, the kind of lad.
Yeah,
very, very distinctive style. When you look at them sort of in close-up photos, they look almost caricatures, but as units, they really work. Yeah. Because he paints in enamels, doesn't he? Which means he doesn't have to varnish them. So you get the true colour of the figures, and I really, really like his stuff.
We're going to go controversial now, slightly. Are you drawn to painters who have a recognisable style, or are you drawn to painters that are extremely accurate? And what draws you to a painter?
I mean, you look at some of the painters that paint for, say, Wargames Foundry that they have on their, sort of Tom Weiss and people like that. the artistry is unbelievable. But I can't afford to spend 2 hours painting a figure or however long it takes them. You know, I mean, they probably are wargamers, but I can't imagine they wargame on the scale that you and I like because
it's not
you just couldn't do it. So I like. Well, again, come back to James. His work rate is incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, he really gets through the stuff, but he does it to such a high standard. You know, as well as painting for other people, because he does it for a living as well. I like sort of bold use of colours. I'm not too fussed about precision. Because most of the time the figures are 4 or 5 feet away, and I like them to pop, from the table. So I tend to paint sort of lighter than maybe you might think.
Because there are certain painters, aren't there? I mean, who you look at a figure and you know it's them straight away.
Yeah.
I mean, Doug Mason, the way that he changes all the poses of all the figures, absolute amazing. And you know it's his figures. Yet I can see stuff in some situations, mostly on Facebook, where people will do 2 or 3 really, really nice French infantry figures, which is going to get a sod all the way to fight in Leipzig. We're going to be able to do 6 foot of Leipzig, not 6 foot table, 6 foot of the entire battle with 3 figures.
Yeah.
And there's never a completed unit.
No.
Because you have to paint differently.
Well, it comes back to the Venn diagram earlier on that I'm a wargamer first and foremost, so I've got to make compromises. I mean, I have, like we were talking about those Lanchinecks earlier, that was, for me, going too far.
Yeah.
But to be honest, it was an experiment. I wanted to see what I could make them look like. And the difference, I must admit, was pretty startling. But there's no way I could spend that amount of time painting another 72. I'd have topped myself, I think, first. So.
When you're painting for yourself, there's a difference to painting for money, because there's a financial value involved, isn't there? So you could, if you wanted, let's say you were massively into Richard the Lionheart, you could spend 3 weeks for your own figure, and make it absolutely brilliant. But nobody's going to pay you 3 weeks worth of money for one figure, are they?
No, they're not. But to be honest, I don't tend to do that.
Yeah.
Even with command figures, sure, you spend a little bit on them, but no, they're there to be played with. And if somebody drops them on the floor, I don't want to have a sleepless night over it,
Yeah, because you've spent months.
Exactly.
And because I see some figures, and especially medievals, where they've done the heraldry and stuff all by hand, and it's all shaded, and it looks amazing, but I wouldn't dare put it on a table. Somebody puts their hand on top of it and then crushes it.
Well, what's that game at Partisan? The Bodkins, is it called? Is it Dave Andrews? And
David Imrie, is it? Or...
Was it Dave Andrews?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But they did, was it Cressy? Or
Yes, with all the individual stuff on it.
I mean, you look at those and you just think, wow. I mean, that must have been a long-term project.
Yeah.
But it was just out of the work, was out of this world. But would I let the ham-fisted bugs I play with within a mile of them? No, I wouldn't if I'd painted those myself, which is why I don't do it.
Yeah. No,
paint them nicely, but enough is enough.
And I think there's a joy in a unit as well as a joy in an individual figure, isn't there?
Well, I don't look at individual figures, to be honest, unless it's maybe a command group. It's the impression, and it's not just one battalion; it's hopefully 10 or 20 or 30. But the thing is, it's the terrain for me. Average figures on fantastic terrain, you've got a great game. Wonderful figures on crap terrain.
Unless people are looking really, really closely, they don't notice the figures, do they?
Well, I saw that at Fiasco, it must be 15, 20 years ago, that there was I don't know, it's 100 Years War Game, but it's knights with all the barding on the horses and all the rest of it. And I walked past it several times because the terrain was like those old TSS tiles. Yeah. People had obviously leant on with their elbows. It looked like a moonscape, I didn't really give it a second glance. Yeah. And I was walking past, it was near the end of the show, and I was a bit bored, and I just had a close look, and the figures were amazing, unbelievable.
It was one of the comedy moments of most war game shows in the 1990s was somebody who just bought a massive stack of those TSS
Yeah.
players.
Yeah.
And they'd either trip and knock them off all everywhere, or they'd walk into a wall because they couldn't see where they were. Yes, hours of fun with those. I mean, they were groundbreaking at the time.
Yeah, they were. Yeah,
they were absolutely groundbreaking at the time. So, how long was it till you decided to go full time? Was it Chris kind of going, right, I need these doing? Was that the point where you went, okay?
Well, it sort of coincided with sort of moving in with somebody, so you've got a mortgage to pay and all the rest of it. So, I had to get a proper job. So I got a proper job for about 9 months, I think. And it was about for council. And it was a great job. I enjoyed doing it. The people were really nice, but I thought, I can't do this full time for the next 40 years. Yeah. So I went job share. I thought I'll test the water first. I went job share, and then I painted the second half of the week. Yeah. So like one week I'd go into the office for 3 days. Next week I'd go in for 2 days, and then the rest of the time I was at home painting. And I did that for probably 15 years, and then the job changed, and I wasn't enjoying it as much, and the work was coming in, so I thought, what the hell, let's give it a go, and that was, and I've been full time ever since. I think that was about 2005, something like that.
Yeah, so quite a long time.
Quite a while, yeah.
Still quite a long time ago. And has everything come to you through word of mouth, or have you ever done a big advertising splurge?
I've been really lucky. I've never really had to. I mean, you get, frankly speaking, megalomaniacs like Chris Flowers. Yeah. You don't need many people like that, really.
We all need one Chris Flowers in our lives.
Yes, we do. Yeah, we do. I mean, Chris, when he first moved up, he had a sort of a very small collection of 3,000 or 4,000 figures. You know, that sounds ridiculous when you say it that way, doesn't it? But I mean, look at it now. But I mean, Chris loves his wargaming, but he's a collector as well, and he just enjoys building up different armies, and so there's always something that he fancies. And so for the last 30 odd years, I've been sort of
filling that gap.
That's right. Yeah.
I remember when I spoke to Chris on the episode I did with him. I went to his house, and we're sat in his wargames room that you're very familiar with. But for listeners who haven't listened to that episode, it's a lovely table, and then one wall is completely covered with trays full of figures, very similar to the Wargames Holiday Centre setup. But this is like floor to ceiling. And the bit where we did Wargamer Painter, Historian Collector, I kind of before we did it, I said, you can't say you're not a collector with that lot behind you. No. You're not going to get away with it with me.
Well, he's got this habit of, he'll say, well, I want to build up, a French army or an Austrian army. Or I'm doing Swedes for him at the moment, which is the last sort of major army he hasn't got. But there's always some
they're
weird...
They're not in that book.
No, they're not. No, he pointed that out.
Does he know?
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
That's all right.
But he's got this habit of finding these odd regiments.
Yeah.
What a nice uniform.
Yeah.
And he'll ring me up and say, what figures could I use for that? I said, I have no idea, Chris. No, in fact, I wouldn't even bother looking.
You tell me.
But it never worked.
Bless him. I'm going to talk a little bit about pricing and stuff like that, but not in details of actual figures. But looking at other painters who advertise and stuff like that, they will do different standards. So this is a Steve Shann figure, this is what you get in, or do you have basic better and best, or how do you
No. I decided from the start that I think I realised quite early on that I didn't really want to work for anybody else.
Yeah.
So how can I avoid doing that? Well, I could send my wife out to work, I suppose, and let her do it. Which, on the face of it, seemed a good idea, but I thought, no, that's probably not a long-term plan, is it? So I thought, I can do this, and I think it's something that I could do and enjoy, and I think it's something I can get better at as well with practice. It's just, as long as I can find people that are happy with what they're getting, then that's that's fine. But I think I was so I think actually maybe desperate is the right word. I think I was so desperate to be able to do things the way I wanted to do them, sort of live my life the way I prefer to do it, which is not, frankly, going out and doing a job I'm not interested in. So I thought, how can I make this work? I thought, well, I suppose I could sort of do it so cheaply that I'd be buried under commissions, or I could try and sort of find a happy medium, So I thought, well, again, coming back to Chris, what he wanted was nicely painted wargames units, but not so expensive that he could buy loads of them.
Yes.
I mean, Chris is, he's got money, but I mean,
Yeah.
you don't want to be silly about it. Again, we come back to the point.
Yeah.
If you're paying a lot of money per figure, you're talking a lot of money for the size of units. In Grand Manor, for example, 30, 40, 50 figures in a unit.
A 10p increase on a figure for a 36-man unit.
Yeah.
Soon starts churning over, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And making a big difference.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah. So it was a question of turning out nice-looking wargames units at a price that somebody that's got money to spend on a hobby can afford, and that they'd be willing to pay. Yeah. And it was a bit of sort of suck it and see involved, really, to start with. I managed to pitch it more or less that I was making a reasonable living, and then
that's good. And do you, again, not going into exacts, but do you charge for a figure, or do you charge for your time? Because I've seen it done in different ways with different people.
No, I think for the customer's sake, you've got to do it for the figure, because then they know exactly what's going on.
What they're paying for.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I don't mind painting like whole units at a time, so I can paint 30, 40 figures in one go. So you get that production line going, whereas some people paint sort of batches of maybe 4, 6, 8, whatever, which I've never found to be very cost effective to paint in big batches. But at the end of the day, it's my job, and I have to try and look at it like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you think, another battalion of Highlanders, but would you prefer to go to the office? Where's the paint?
Where's the book on painting tartan?
So, it's.
And do you find that that people will tend to give you the harder stuff to do, or do you get a good mix where you have a unit of Arab spearmen that's just got one colour coat on and a spear, and Württemberg Guard or something like that in some horrendous uniform? Do you get a reasonable mix, or do you find that people fire the really difficult units at you?
Well, if they don't last long. No. To be honest, no. I'm joking. That's never been an issue. The number of people I've actually painted for over the years is actually quite small. I've just been lucky that I've had, Chris, but also other people that I've had regular work from, and they're serious about their hobby, and they want what they want. So if I do 10 battalions of British, one of them's likely to be a battalion of Highlanders, which is fair enough. But
and has it been mentally? I think it's been much better for you doing this than working in an office.
Yeah.
But financially, has it been difficult to make it pay, or have you had the right people as customers?
It's always paid enough that we've been okay, but I'd be lying if I said that I wouldn't have earned more if I'd been a teacher or worked in an office or whatever. But that was never really an option that I fancied. So it was a sacrifice I was willing to make. Let's put it that way.
So just in general, then, and I'll kind of state my position on this before I get yours. Get myself in trouble already. It might just be being in Yorkshire, but I think wargamers are tight bastards. and I think that, doing a lot of painting myself, I'm aware of how much work goes into getting a good figure and a good big unit as well. And I'm kind of think, and I've heard the conversation at shows and stuff as well, just on the periphery, where you kind of look at something, a unit of figures that might be on for... There used to be a guy who used to take painted stuff around the shows, and it used to be like 200 quid or something like that for a unit. And people go, oh, that's a lot of money, that. But when you break it down, it isn't really, in terms of time, hours, and especially now with more prevalence of plastic stuff where you're making it as well as painting it. What are your kind of thoughts on that? Do you think there's wargamers are tight bastards, or however you want to phrase it? But I think wargamers tend to pay less than things are worth. That's probably a better way of putting it.
I think because for the people that are buying the figures, for them it's a hobby.
Yes.
Whereas for me it's a living.
Yeah.
And they don't always remember the difference.
Yeah.
If they're in business themselves, they tend to understand it a bit more. But one thing I have noticed weirdly, is that even people that are willing to spend quite a lot of money on figures, if they want large numbers of them, they seem very reluctant to spend money on terrain.
Yes,
because I sort of make buildings and stuff like that as well, and that can be pretty time consuming, depending on how detailed you want them to be. And that's one area where I don't tend to cut corners, because you've got to put the time in to make them look right. Yeah. So if you want to have a nice building making, that could be, what somebody might consider to be a lot of money, but well, I can't do it for any less than that.
No, and I think there is I've had David Marshall on the show in the past, who's an absolutely amazing terrain builder.
Certainly is.
And to be honest, looking at his stuff, I didn't dare ask him about prices, because I can't imagine any of that. I mean, some of the stuff that he's done recently, there was a huge port scene in 28mm that literally had filled up the room that he was using for modelling. I'd be worried about.
Well, those things he did for Ian Smith, that big American Civil War fort and that big peninsula thing he did as well. It's just breathtaking, isn't it?
Amazing stuff. So get your hands in your pocket, people. Stop me. That's what I'm saying. Because we were talking off air earlier on about one of my little World War II ships. I'll say little. The bases are 22 centimetres by 6, and I worked out at £10 an hour, including the model and bits and pieces, I would have to sell them for about 125 quid to make for £10 an hour. Now, I don't know whether people would balk at that or whether they would go, give me 20. But most of the war gamers I know would go, whoa, how much? I'll give you 20 quid. Well, the model cost me 17 quid. So I do think that maybe, especially when you compare us to model railways, we talked about that earlier downstairs as well, 300-400 quid for a single loco.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how people put value on things, isn't it? I mean, friends of mine that are non-war gamers, when they hear how much stuff costs, they're a bit taken aback sometimes. I say, well, somebody might buy a collection that's ready to go, and they might spend £5,000 on it, which on your hobby, that's a lot of money. But you go out and buy a car, the second you drive it off the forecourt, that amount's gone up in carbon monoxide, and nobody thinks twice about that. Or you might go on a nice holiday somewhere in the sun.
And some of these older figures done by the people we were talking about earlier on, they're only going to appreciate in value. Yeah. If I could get my hand on some classic Italian Wars figures, then I'd pay top dollar for them. Yeah. But thank you very much for talking about that, because I know it's not an easy subject to talk about pricing and stuff like that. But I think it's important to get it out there that I think that us as war gamers are underpaying for things that people are physically producing.
Well, I think wargaming, the hobby itself, has got a lot more professionalised, hasn't it, the last few decades?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember, when we started out, there was a few very small companies making figures in their back rooms, and it was, pretty cheap and cheerful. People make their living out of it now, and I think, people have to try and understand that.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's a very good point, because it was kind of like a cottage industry, wasn't it? I mean, we both know a chap called Steve Royan, who used to run Hallmark figures, and that was done, casting was done in his garage, and it was all run from his rear bedroom in his house. Whereas now you've got the likes of Warlord Games that have got, 50 employees or maybe even more, and a big warehouse, and it's run more on better not say Aldi, had I? More on a Sainsbury's basis. It's run as a big business, and there's positives and negatives. Very much so. So geeky painters out there are going to want to know the sort of stuff that you use and that sort of stuff. It's like when guitarists get together, they always want to know, what pedals have you got, or all this sort of stuff. So tell us about your paint table setup. How you're sitting there all day working. Got to be a comfortable environment. So how have you set that up?
I'm surprised I haven't got a lot more back trouble, to be honest, because it's my wargames table, which has got like a cross brace underneath it. And I just rest my foot on that. I rest my left hand on my knee, which is sort of holding the brush, and then I bring the figure to it and paint it that way. It's very unergonomic.
I was going to say, you've not had somebody in and got a fancy chair.
No. Some people can paint sort of freehand, with a straight back and all the rest of it. I find that difficult. Yeah.
And what's your what's your light source in? Have you got specialised lamps in there, or?
I used to have a couple of just strip lights that were completely inadequate.
Yeah.
And then when we had the cellar redone, this guy, the electrician, came on and says, well, there were these sort of, I don't know, with a white light or something. But they're miles better. They give it, but again, no sort of direct lighting onto the figure, so I'm a bit sort of slapdash about that.
Yeah, so you don't use it like I have an OT light, a hobby light that sits over the top of the desk. You don't have
No, it's pretty basic stuff, really.
And we're both older than we were when we were younger. Is one way of putting it.
Yeah.
So, are you using glasses to paint? Are you using magnification?
Glasses for sure. Yeah, the last sort of 10 or 12 years I've had to wear glasses. I can't see a damn thing without them. So
Have you ever had a go? Have you ever had a go with one of these? You look like a right pillar queen.
But you put on your head.
These things that you put on your head, and they've got lights and three different lenses and all.
Yeah.
The problem that I'm getting better now, but when I started to use magnification because my eyes were starting to go a little bit, I had problem judging where the end of the paintbrush was.
Yeah,
because everything, obviously, everything was bigger. But the end of the paintbrush was getting to the figure quicker because it was going a shorter distance. There was a lot of splodges over stuff.
Mark one eyeball.
Mark one eyeballs. That's quite good, mate. That's quite good that you've not had to.
No, glasses are the only sort of compromise I like to make, really.
Because I'm. They have the spinny thing in Asda with the cheap reading glasses on, and I'm going down that very quickly with the increased magnification to get what I need. So, talk a little bit about techniques then, and horses. Are you still doing your horses in oils?
Yeah, usually.
Yeah. So, just for people who don't know, just briefly explain that technique.
Well, clean the horse up, stick it on a piece of card usually, and then I give it a coat of white enamel, just to seal the thing, and then I'll paint the horse, usually sort of orange or some shade of yellow or whatever, something reasonably bright. Yeah, it's the oil paint over the top. Leave it for several hours to dry, and then just wipe off. And it's quick. But it's a decent effect as well.
It's amazingly effective.
Yeah, it is.
Amazingly effective. Every time I do it, I think. And do you do big groups of horses using that technique? It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah. It's such a messy job.
I've done 80, 100 easily, and just my hands are just... There are people that wear like gloves, rubber gloves now, when they're painting stuff, and you watch a lot of videos on YouTube. I mean, the amount of oil paint that's gone through my hands over the years, it can't be bad for you, because I'd have dropped dead by now with the amount of oil that I've had on there. Yeah. Do you use, and don't forget we're on Geek Zone now, so do you use the bottom layer, do you paint that as oil, or do you use acrylics for that bottom layer, the first bright layer?
No, I use acrylics for that. No, it doesn't seem to matter. I used to use enamels, and I thought, because they obviously took a lot longer to dry, I thought, I wonder what happened to these acrylics, and nothing happened. So I'll do that.
Yeah, no, it's a switch that I made, because when I started, I used oil for that, and then I would leave them for like a week before I put the top coat on, and I was kind of going, this is a bit stupid, this. What if I try acrylics, very much the same as yourself? Yeah. And obviously it works. It works fine. So you mentioned earlier on that black was your preferred undercoat.
Yeah,
for
black or very dark grey, yeah.
So there's a French infantryman in front of you. What's your plan of attack for that? You talked about batches, so what sort of size batches do you do?
Yeah, well, typically a battalion might be, say, 36. That as a minimum.
Right.
And if I've got, sometimes, not so much now, but in years gone by when customers were building collections up, or I'm building my own collection up, I might think, well, I'll do a couple of battalions at once, so you're putting 72 through in one go. And as long as if you've got a plan in your head that you just try and maybe do one or two stages every day, before you know you've done them. And when it's done, it's done. It's two battalions rather than just one.
Yeah, and it works that way.
Yeah, it does, yeah. But again, if I were painting, say, Lanchinecks, I'd do them in, or Confederates, I'd probably do them in batches of maybe 4 or 6, because you want all the variation of colours, and then do 10, 12 batches and then mix them all up and base them.
Yeah, I was going to say, with something like that, would you do 6 to 8 very similar, and then another 6 to 8 very similar to each other but different to the first lot, and then mix them
with
all
the
in?
Lanchenecks, you mean?
With Lanchenecks or Confederates, or a non-uniform uniform.
Non-uniform. Well, you tend to have a dominant colour, don't you?
Yes.
So maybe sort of button or grey or whatever in the case of Confederates. So I might do sort of 8 or 10 with grey jackets and another 8 or 10 with grey trousers, and then reverse it for brown or tan or whatever else you're using, and just build it up that way. And the thing is, if you keep the batches coming through, you finish something off every day, which psychologically is quite helpful. When you're doing a job like that.
Do you build dark to light? Do you use washes? How do you paint the figure?
I must admit, I rarely use washes. I mean, sometimes mainly on drums or drum skins, or maybe on faces I might use them. But no, usually it's dark to light. I mean, some people paint sort of hands and faces first, don't they? Whereas I tend to do those last.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, good.
Because
I've never understood why people do faces and hands first. Yeah. Because I do the big areas first, and I can be as messy as I want. But if I've just painted and got an absolutely perfect face and pair of hands, and then I'm doing this massive area of armour, would be the worst for me, because I use a lot of dry brushing and washes for armour.
Yeah.
All I'm going to get is a silver face.
Yeah.
Which is, and I'm going to have to paint it again. So I just don't understand that. So I'm glad you're that way around, as we say. Are you painting mostly in acrylics or entirely in acrylics?
Almost entirely.
Yeah.
They're just quicker and easier to use, dry quicker. Yeah.
And has that developed over the years? Did you start with enamels and then come into acrylics?
No, I tried enamels just to see if it worked, and I probably didn't give it enough practice. But to be honest, I thought, well, acrylics are fine. They mix nice and easily, so you can. I like to mix colours as well, just use them straight out of the pot. So.
And are you a paintbrush licker?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that just rules out enamel straight away, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, yeah.
I've done that. I've just discovered weathering. Enamel weathering. Oh, wow, it's fantastic. Some of my
vehicles.
On ships.
Oh, you're all right.
Yeah, so rust streaks and grime.
I'm trying to use it on World War II vehicles.
Yeah,
it's time consuming.
Yeah, it looks amazing. And that's all enamel based.
Yeah.
And I've had to train myself to not lick the brush.
Yeah, when you're repointing it.
Because it kind of like, oh no, and then you do it once or twice, and it does make you feel quite sick.
Yeah,
I've not got to the point of reading the contents of AK Interactive Rust Streak powder yet.
Not
but
to be taken internally.
I'm sure it's not good for you.
No.
I'm really sure it's not. They certainly don't spread it onto bagels or anything like that, do they? So it's not very good at all. When you're doing your batches, then how do you work? Do you block and then block all, then highlight all? How does it work?
Yeah, I just find it works for me in terms of getting through them. Is just do the block painting first, which includes hands, faces, hair, and that kind of thing, and then things like cross belts and stuff like that. I'll do in the base coat. Get all of the base colours on, and then just highlight them in whichever order works, depending on the figures, really.
And do you have a recipe book? Do you keep right? I'm going to do this first, then that first, then that first, and it helps you do your 97th Battalion of French Infantry, or do you just kind of go at it?
I'm pretty sort of stoical about it, really. To be honest, if they're for somebody else, it's my job. If they're for me, do you want them or not?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's a very pragmatic way of looking at it, for sure. If we had a little time machine and we went back to Steve Shann, painter, 30 years ago or 25 years ago, and you looked at those figures then to now, how has your style developed over the years?
Style, I'm not sure it's changed that much. I've just got better at it, because the one thing about the hobby is you don't find anybody that says, "Oh no, I'm sorry, that's a trade secret. I'm not telling you."
Yeah,
you go to a show and you say, "Wow, that's a really nice effect. How do you do it?" They'll tell you. They'll in detail. Or if you contact them online, they'll tell you. And I make no bones about it. That's how I've learned a lot from just what other people have told me.
Some people will tell you you've not even asked them.
No,
They tell me stuff, and it's like, oh, really? Yeah, I've never painted a horse before. Thanks for that.
a lot of it's practice as well. It's just putting the hours in.
Yeah, I mean, it's that thing where they say if you do 10,000 hours at anything, you'll be really good at it.
Yeah, I think there's probably
there's truth in that for sure. But when you look back at stuff you did years ago, are you still proud of what you did and still happy with what you did, or is that we talked about earlier on, that perfectionist? Is kind of going, I want to go back and change it.
Well, usually it develops gradually. So you'll make little improvements. You might discover a brown that works slightly better on musky stocks. Yeah. So that's neither here nor there really. But there are some things that that mixtures of colours that suddenly think, oh yeah, I mean that's miles better than that brown. By mixing that brown and this before or whatever it is, that's it. And then you look back on the previous ones and they're duller, they're dark. And, figures age like we do.
Exactly.
The varnish discolours and, they get a certain amount of damage over the years. But
have you got any techniques that you have fallen in love with, out of love, and in love and out of love? Because washing faces is, for me, because when we had the old Winsor & Newton nut brown and there was another one with a squirrel on, a reddy brown.
Right.
I was washing all my faces, and then I thought, I don't really like that. And then I started not washing my faces. Then I started doing it again when GW Devlin Mud came out, and then I've stopped doing it. I don't wash the faces at all now.
No.
I just use, a dark to light colour scheme on it.
Yeah.
Is there any techniques that you've used and stopped and maybe come back to?
No, normally if I stop something, it's for a good reason.
It's like, this is shit.
This isn't as good as it should be. So, if I find something that works better, I'll switch. Unless a customer says, well, don't, because I want them all to look the same, even if it's, according to your perfectionist point of view, not as good.
Yeah.
I'm quite happy with it, so leave it alone. But normally if I find something that's better, I switch and stick with it.
No worries. The sticky question of varnish. Oh, so many different possibilities with this. What's your varnish?
The figures I paint get used. So once they're painted, I'll give them a good coat of Humbrol gloss. Enamel varnish. Get it
hard as nails.
Yeah.
Hard as nails.
You can bounce them off the floor. And
I'm surprised. I'm surprised that the British Army don't make tanks out of that stuff.
Yeah, it's
fucking hard.
It does the job,
Yeah.
but it's glossy. So it's then a question of how do you mat it down? And I just use a matte spray. Yeah.
Any particular brand or?
Of recent years, the mini bit stuff that I can do.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I think it's the Elite one. I think it's called. That's very matte. I know some people prefer the other one, which is more sort of a matty sheen to it.
Yeah.
But
and is that your preferred way of a figure looking to be pure matte, or do you like a little bit of a shine on it?
Usually, I like a matte personally. As long as you can keep the colour vibrancy, and that can be a bit of an issue sometimes.
Because we went through that period in the bit like kipper ties, really. We went from really gloss, didn't we? Yeah. Was the vogue with kind of the toy soldier look, and then I seem to remember in the 90s we were all into satin coat, which was kind of halfway between the two.
Yeah.
And now it's dull, matte, really, really dull.
Apart from that blog, is it unfashionably shiny? Is it?
Yeah.
They really are glossy, aren't they?
Yeah, good lad for holding out. We don't. Yeah, good lad.
It still looks good.
Yeah. No, it's very good indeed. Basing then? Do you do basing for customers?
Almost always.
Yeah. And do you find that easier to present a completed unit rather than? Because I when I did it years ago now, obviously, but when I handed something over in a box and it was all laid out and ready for somebody else to base, I kind of felt like I hadn't finished them.
I agree. Yeah. I usually I don't do that because they want the basing, but I have done that. It feels a bit sort of this isn't really finished,
Yeah, but some people are like I have a distinctive basing style. That even if I wanted to change, I can't change now because everything is in that way.
Yeah.
All my terrain is that way.
Yeah.
So there was one guy one of my internet friends who came on and complained and said my basing was really basic and I need to up it and up my game and all this sort of stuff.
Okay.
The army that he was talking about won a painting prize. So I emailed him back with a picture of the prize and said, God, if I'd done my basing better, I could have won it twice.
Yeah, there's no place in some people, is there?
Yeah, there isn't, mate. And what's your basing style and how do you do it?
Once the figures are stuck down, I use sort of little modelling knives and put tile ground. I use tile ground because it's nice and easy to manipulate. And I usually use a coloured one as well, so it gives a bit chips off. And then sprinkle, the usual, sharp sand and gravel, stones, whatever. Let it dry. I always seal it with chocolate brown. Just again, let that dry, and there's 3 lots of dry brushing just to sort of get the
texture,
the texture and colour that I want. And then if I want to use grass and tufts, then But that's changed. I mean, years ago I used to do the old sort of Peter Gilder with the sand mixed with and do it that way, but I could never get it to look quite the way I wanted. Whereas I finally got better results with this. I tend to do that.
And are you a grass tufts aficionado? Have you got a big bag of grass tufts, or are you not into that? Because you can buy anything now.
You can't. I try not to overdo it because I think some of them can look a bit busy.
Yeah,
like it's a Chelsea flower show on on display. No, I'm not so keen on that. I tend to use these sort of aridy earth coloured ones because I find they contrast nicely with the green grass. So again, it's it's basic, but it's effective. And like you, I tend to all my stuff's based the same. So
yeah. Because I go on to War Painter is where I get my tufts from. And I go onto that website and they'll be like mixed flowers and heather, and I just can't help myself. I have to buy one of each.
Yeah.
And then I come to base stuff and it's like, rabbit stuck in the headlights because you can't pick the right one. Pick the right one. So just a few things to go through because we as we finish off. It's kind of, I don't think it's a thorny thing. If somebody comes to you and says, I want these figures painted, but I want them painted like Doug Mason or like Ken Riley. Do you do that?
There's no obvious answer, isn't there?
Yeah, fuck off.
No, go to Doug Mason or get a Ken Riley.
Yeah. But do you change your style for people if they ask?
No, the only thing I'll try and do is if they've got figures that they bought, is I will try and match to an extent the colours. Because you can mix them and you can get quite subtle differences in shade. So I'm quite happy to try and match a colour shade, but not a painting style. Because I don't think you can, not really.
And have you ever had any completely ridiculous customer requests that you've just gone, no? No, you've been all right.
No,
you've been all right.
I've been all right, yeah.
No. Will you do? No. You know the sort of people who ask those questions, and it's like, no. So that leads me on to an interesting question that I've asked a couple of people who work in the hobby, and it's how do you draw that line between you and things for you and you and things for your business?
Yeah. Well, what I tend to do is at the start of the month I'll say, okay, these are the figures I've got to paint for the people. There's usually a big pile of them, so this is what I need to do this month. So I'll take those figures out and I'll prep them, and by the end of the month, those need to be done. And if it's going well, then I'll add in stuff of my own to do on top. But to be honest, I'm sort of easing off now, and I'm pretty much part time. So I've got a bit more time because I wanted to do a bit more writing, like I was alluding to before. And we've got a granddaughter now as well.
Sure.
I've got other priorities, other things I want to do, and
so
maybe at the end of this year I might even stop altogether. So once I do, my own collection is good, because I'm so accustomed to painting numbers of figures that my collection, which is pathetic at the moment, will grow. But so no, it hasn't really. Well, it's stopped me from painting the stuff for myself that I would like. But
But you say you've eased off a little bit now, but if we go back to like a full full steam ahead, how would you be quite regimental in the way that you would run your day? Would you start at a certain time, have a meal break, finish at a certain time, or would you be more flexible around it?
I put the hours in, that's for sure. But I mean, one of the drawbacks of working for yourself and working at home is that you're never really away from it. It's just a few steps down into the cellar, and that my wife says, "Look, it's Saturday or it's Sunday, or maybe you've done enough for the week." So it does intrude. I don't think there's any way you can get around that. I mean, I'm disciplined in the sense that I put the hours in. It sort of bleeds into your private life as well.
Yeah. Having done it, I know it's a long time ago now when I did it, but there is a little bit of being on your own and being kind of in your own little bunker in your case.
Yeah,
you're
literally,
in the cellar, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're down in the cellar. Listen to something. Do you have the radio on? What kind of keeps you ticking over during the day?
I think that's one of the big positives from what I do is that I've got that space to.
Yeah.
So if I want to listen to some music, I'll listen to some music. But I tend to listen to a lot of either audio books or podcasts, of course. Or now that I've entered the 21st century and got a proper mobile phone, I can listen to stuff on YouTube, and I mean the stuff that's on there is just
amazing.
Unbelievable. I mean, anything you want to know about, you can listen to a lecture on it from an expert. So it's been a second education having that opportunity.
Well, it's if you fancy, it's an opportunity to like learn new languages and learn new skills and stuff. If you just have it on in the background.
Yeah, I mean, I try and keep my Spanish up, so I'll listen to maybe Spanish radio because with the internet you can log on to channels and listen to it live, or maybe some program that a Spanish teacher's doing that I can sort of listen to that. That's a big positive.
And obviously, apart from Yorkshire Gamer podcast, what sort of stuff do you listen to? We've talked about the Spanish stuff. Do you? I mean, I've recently been listening to Stephen Fry reading Sherlock Holmes books. They're really good. Yeah. And I've The Rest is History. That is a really good podcast. And Death Row Diaries as well, because I've got to have a bit of work-related stuff in there. So, what is there anything series or anything that you'd recommend to anyone, or that you listen to a lot?
I like that Radio 4 program that Melvin Bragg does in our time. It's a real smorgasbord of subjects. It can be sort of history one week and philosophy the next, and art the next. They don't all necessarily appeal, but they're always interesting. So I'll listen to those.
Yeah, they are. But I've listened to a few of them, mostly history stuff.
Yeah,
they did one on Garibaldi a couple of years ago, and that's kind of where I picked it up. That's very good. Yeah, and very good. So do you find yourself having stuff that ticks your brain over while you're doing the 57th pair of boots?
Yeah, I rarely paint in silence. So I like to have something on.
Oh, that's good. Good to hear. So just finally from yourself then, and we spoke earlier on, and you said there's no magic tips to it. So there'll be quite a few people listening to this who maybe don't paint a lot, or maybe starting the journey in painting. So be brutally honest as you like, because I will. What would you say to somebody new to starting painting, or tips for people who are listening about painting?
Well, there is one element of it that is really, really simple. Unless you practice, you're not going to get better.
Yeah.
That's really it. Because your first efforts, you're then automatically going to compare them with things that you've seen. Yeah. And that's not going to be favourable, is it? It can't be. Yeah. It goes back to what I said about all the variations of terrain I've done over the years. It's taken me decades to get to where I want to be. Yeah. But anybody that is willing to put in a bit of effort can learn to paint to a decent standard with some practice. That really is all there is to it. Yeah, there is no magic to it.
I've got to agree with that. And if I said anything on top of that, it would be don't be intimidated by other people's painting. Yeah, because sometimes people will go, "Oh, I love that ship you've done, or that pipe block you've done. I'll never be able to paint like that." Yeah, and listen to me now, because there are people that I look at and I go, I'd never be able to do that. And it doesn't matter. It's about getting something on the table that you're proud of.
There are a few painters that are just exceptional. Yeah. I don't know whether they go to art college or whatever, but they just seem to have an understanding of colour and how to use it.
Cheating, that's what they do. Yeah. Cheating. I don't know how they do it, but they're cheating.
And, I look at their work and, I accept I'm not going to be able to sort of do that. Even if I did spend 2 hours to figure it. It's because it's I don't know. It's just a knack. It's just a technique that they've got. But you're right. If you can produce stuff that you can put on the table and think, they look good on the table.
Yeah. I think we've talked about it before. We both understand that the level of work that needs to go into something for it to look good in a big unit on the table, and that's very, very different to winning these Golden Demon prizes that the Warhammer people do. And if you're coming from GW, it's a different style, isn't it? You haven't got, well, in our cases, you haven't got a 20-figure army.
No.
You haven't got a unit with 20 figures in. Everything is bigger, and it's a different style, isn't it? A different way.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I reckon, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes a figure.
Yeah.
Is what I would look at. That if you're painting one at a time, that's not doable.
Yeah.
But if you're painting 30, 40 at a time,
yeah,
you can do. Yeah, I reckon 20 minutes, something like that.
Yeah.
Figure.
So is what, a battalion of 36 taking you maybe a day and a half, something like that.
Yeah. And then you've got to prep them before and base them afterwards. But I tend to do that in big batches anyway.
Yeah.
So
the painting itself is
I think that's about right, and you can get a good result in that.
That's very, very reasonable. Well, I'd like to thank you very much for your time today, Steve. And it took you a bit of persuasion to get you on. But, I'm so glad you've done it, because we've spoken about so many things. It's made me realise how much you've done. And I hope it's made you realise how much you've actually done in the hobby. Because you kind of forget. I mean, you were saying, you're like, I can't remember the first article I did.
No,
it's like so long ago.
You've reminded me of quite a few things. Yeah. Well, because I said to my wife, "Well, Ken's asked me to do this." I'm not sure. I can't think what I'd say. I mean, what have I done?
Yeah.
She says, "Well, just think of stuff that you've done in the hobby over the last 30 odd years." I thought, "Well, yeah."
I can make people talk.
Yeah,
trust me.
I've noticed that. Yeah. Well, I've really enjoyed it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We always finish with an opportunity for you to ask me a question if you've got one. If you haven't,
no. As a matter of fact, I have. You've probably been asked this before.
No.
What made you do this? the podcast? Because you're setting yourself up for a lot of trouble, aren't you? Really?
Yeah. But those of you who know what I do for a living, I'm quite used to being in trouble.
Yeah.
So that's not really an issue. If somebody's coming at me with some pointy words, it's a lot better than somebody coming at me with a pointy knife.
Yes.
Or worse. So I've whatever you're going to say on the internet, I've had worse, a lot worse. And maybe one day when I retire, I'll tell some of those stories on the podcast. But it was very much. I have told the story before on here before, but I'm quite happy to tell it again. I changed jobs in that I changed locations. So I was going from a 20-minute commute to an hour and a half commute. So I was looking for things to listen to. So I started listening to music, and I love music, but I was kind of getting fed up with it. And so I started to listen to talk radio. And regardless of which side of the political spectrum you are on, listening to people on talk radio is you're just ready to jump out the window straight away, because nobody can rationally debate about anything anymore. You're either a Marxist or a Nazi. There's nothing in between.
Yeah.
And there's so many different topics where you can have a centralist point of view on it, but if you slightly strip away from what the narrative is, you are either a Marxist or a fascist. So I kind of gave up with that, because I was just shouting at the time. So then I discovered a podcast called The Veteran Wargamer with Jay Arnold in America. And he is literally a veteran soldier who wargames. And I kind of started listening to that. And he doesn't do a lot of stuff that I'm into, but I just it's like Wargames radio. It's like Wargames geeks talking to each other. And whatever it is, I'm interested in it. So then I started to pick more and more of these podcasts up. Henry's Battle Chat, God's Own Scale. But I really enjoyed it. But one thing that really got my goat was that it was all skirmish based. And there was a lot of comments on there like, "Oh, well, you can't do that in 28mm. And, 30-foot table, that's not possible." And I'm sat there thinking, God, I do that. Yeah. I do that all the time. And then my good mate Sean Clark, on his God's Own Scale podcast, he had Pete Berry on from Bacchus.
Oh, yeah.
And Pete was going on. He says, and I've just, he's evangelical about 6mm, and I do love the guy, and I do get on with him quite well, and he's going to come on the show. But he's going, and I've just seen this picture in Wargame Soldiers and Strategy, and it was a British 8-inch howitzer in 28mm, well, you can never use that anywhere, and it's absolutely ridiculous, and you would have to set it up 30 feet away from where it was firing and all this stuff. And that was my howitzer. That was my 8-inch howitzer, and I'd Henry Hyde had asked me for some pictures for an article he was going to do, so I sent him some. So I was up here, and occasionally I'll bring a little tot of whiskey up with me and I had a few. I'm like, right, you bastards, yeah, bloody right, you're having it. So I put a tweet out that said, right, is there room for a wargames podcast specifically about 28mm wargaming, big tables, all that sort of stuff? And then fell asleep. I woke up in the morning, completely forgot about it, and there's like 129 bloody things on me Twitter, and all of them saying, yeah, it's a brilliant idea. It's a brilliant idea. Right. And since I started it, I've very much tried not to. I'm not being negative about any other style of gaming. What I'm trying to do is go, here's big gaming. This is mostly 28mm, although I'm scale agnostic. I'm quite happy to have, like Jerry does with the big units with 10mm, and have people on and talk about what they think of big gamers and have a general discussion. You know, if you play bolt action or skirmish games, there are loads of podcasts out there for you. So I thought for at that stage, the 5 people who I knew who still did big games, I thought, well, this is for you. And now regularly over 2,000 people listen.
I think what we said earlier, that there are a lot of groups like us out there, just anonymous, quiet guys that have known each other for donkey's years, that are lucky enough to have big collections, and somebody's got a big table, and that's what it's happening.
Yeah, and like yourself, people like to listen to stuff they're interested in whilst painting. You know, wargamers. If we could harness the energy used by wargamers pottering around wargames rooms and not actually doing anything, we would solve the global climate crisis in about 30 seconds. Just with like little heat pads on our feet or something. Because we do nothing. Before you came, I must have spent 2 hours moving stuff from one side of the table to the other, and then you're like a butterfly, aren't you? You go, oh, I forgot about that. Yeah. Where's that come from? Oh, well, I'll put that in this pile here. I've got 2 books there, Italian Wars books I'm supposed to be reviewing on YouTube channel. Oh, right. And I forgot about them. And I'm just looking over there and realise I've just put something else on top of them. So I've already forgotten about them, having remembered them earlier.
Yeah, your wargaming filing system's fairly eccentric.
Yeah, I do like to have a little bit of stuff. But that's brilliant, Steve. Thanks very much for coming on. Thanks for doing the show.
It's been a pleasure.
And if you'd just like to say good night to everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Well, I hope you're all still with us. Just over 3 hours. I didn't quite expect that when I started to put it all together. I didn't realise we'd gone that far, but I enjoyed the chat with Steve. And sometimes when you're talking with old friends, the conversation does go on a little bit longer. But if you're painting, think of all those extra figures you've painted during the time that this episode has been on. Big thanks for Steve to coming on the show. He was a little bit apprehensive, as we said at the end there, but I think he did a cracking job. And if you're interested in anything that Steve does, then I'll put a link to Steve's Nations in Arms blog on wherever this is being listened to, so you can pop down and have a look at Steve's figures and his publications, etc. Very, very good, excellent painter, and the scenario books are highly recommended. As I said in the interview itself, if they were rubbish, I'd tell you, and I would have told Steve during the interview, but they're not. They're really, really good, really high quality, literally straight on a table, play the game, everything you need is there. So that's Steve, episode 40. Episode 41 is hopefully going to be in 3 weeks' time. Although we've just been 2 weeks between this episode and the Martin Kelly one, that was in relation more to scheduling, and I am planning an episode every 3 weeks, and guests are now booked in all the way up to July. So the next open date I've got is August. So there's still loads of people on my list I want to speak to, and loads have come to mind every now and again. But unfortunately, I can't fit everybody in. Without doing this on a daily or weekly basis, and that with me working, that just isn't possible. So, got some great guests lined up for you between now and the autumn, and some really big names, some fantastic people you might not have heard of who are very influential to me or the hobby. So, the next episode, episode 41, is going to be with a chap called Nicholas Schofield. Now, Nicholas is not a wargamer. He has dabbled in the past, but he's seen sense and moved on. But he is an historian, or he's an author who's written a book called Victorian Crusaders, British and Irish Volunteers in the Papal Army, 1860 to 70. Now, any of you who follow my stuff outside of the podcast will know that this is a period of history I'm extremely interested in, and I've said many times on here, I'm interested in people's mindsets and people's motivations to fight in wars that aren't necessarily on their doorstep, but are maybe for a cause in which they particularly believe in. Very much like the International Brigades of the Spanish Civil War is one that I have particular interest in. And the British Volunteers in the Papal Army is another one. So it's going to be a bit of a different episode. It's not going to follow the usual format. It's a bit of indulgence for me because I really enjoyed this book and the period. But if it works well and everyone enjoys it, then it's going to give me another option for a different type of show. Just to slot in with the ordinary ones that I do, and the Brews in the Vineyard and the catch-up episodes. All of those are just different things to keep me interested and hopefully you interested as well. So thanks for sticking with me during this really long interview. I hope you have a great couple of 3 weeks, and I'll see you very shortly with a new episode. Until then, Ziddy.